I have the same ideas on lattes. So you famously say like a $5 latte will not make you broke. What are the habits that secretly keep people broke?
I think it's the idea of just grossly living beyond your means and finding new and creative ways to do it. Let's give an example. Buy now, pay later. Okay? At first, buy now, pay later was actually an incredible service because it provided essentially a line of credit to those who couldn't necessarily get a credit card, who couldn't get a traditional loan. And this is when you were buying a refrigerator or tools for your work or a new laptop that you really needed to do your job. But now you're buy now, pay latering a burrito or Coachella tickets. So you go, you have the thing, and then you still have to pay more installments. I just think that like we have to have a real conversation with all of us as a society and say, when is enough? Because we are on this consumerism hamster wheel that is constantly going to tell you that if you don't have XYZ, you aren't special, you aren't important, you're not rich, and you will go broke trying to build a perception for yourself so that other people think that you're doing a lot better than you actually are.
So I saw that the other day. I saw an ad on Instagram, I think I screenshotted it, that was a buy now, pay later for dresses and outfits. Like, do you think that buy now, pay later now is a way that makes most people broke? Like most people should not use buy now, pay later?
I don't, because here's the thing. If you were to use a, buy now, pay later service, Klarna, Afterpay, whatever, and used it perfectly, you could come out unscathed. How many people do you trust to do anything perfectly? I mean, I can't even make microwave mac and cheese properly half the time. I mess up a step or something. I just feel like the risk is too large. The reward is not worth it. If you can't afford it on your own, then you can't afford it. You need to be saving up for it. You need to be budgeting for it. And for me, I think that what they don't tell you is that if you do miss a payment, the consequences are very severe. And there are decently high interest rates on those loans because that's what it is. It's a loan. It's not some fancy payment strategy. It's a loan. In the same way that you would go out and borrow money from a bank and miss a payment, you're going to have the same problem here.
It's so scary, isn't it? Like, it kind of makes me think about, I don't know if we all just complain too much, if it is reality, but do you think it is actually harder to be young in this generation than it was previously? Like, is it harder to be young and feel like you're rich in this generation than previous generations?
Of course. It is not in your head. It is not even, frankly, quote unquote, your fault. However, we have to understand the reality, but then also know what we can do to change it. So the reality is this. The cost of an education is sky high. Your parents could go to college, your grandparents go to college for $45 and a handshake. Now, a private 4-year education is multiple six figures. Homes have very literally 10x'd in cost over the past 100 years. Then you've got wage stagnation. That's awesome. The fact that our dollar just does not keep up with the rate of inflation. And just the fact that we have to recognize that we have so many more touch points of temptation, I'll call them, than our parents did. Because in your parents' generation, they had keeping up with the Joneses. They would look out their window with their little binoculars and be like, oh my gosh, the Joneses, they got a new station wagon. Or the Joneses, they got a new TV. Great. You can only see as close as your access gets you. You are actually basing your financial reality on someone who you have proximity to. Even if it's the richest person in your neighborhood, it's your neighborhood. But now, with the 2x4 screen in your hand, you literally have unfettered access to levels of wealth that have, frankly, never before been seen. I have no business knowing what the inside of Kim Kardashian's private plane looks like. I have no business knowing what island some royal is renting out for their luxurious wedding. But once you start seeing these things, that becomes an anchor. And you've probably heard of anchoring bias. It's essentially, when you're given a reference point, you immediately think that your answer to another question should be close to that number. So researchers asked a question. It was like, hey, how many countries are in Africa? And these are people who didn't know the answer, but they would essentially incept a number. And based on the number that they would tell these people ahead of asking them that question, their answer would be slightly closer to that number than, there was some sort of statistical significance there. And the problem is when you are anchoring your life against private jet money, against private island money, against vacation every single month money, you don't live in reality. And I think it's also fair to say that you don't need private island money to have a happy life. And that's the difference.
That's such a good point, because mimetic desire, the fact that I don't even know I want something until I see my rich BFF has it.
I'm going to tell you what you want.
Yeah, it is actually wild. And humans, apparently that is the only way that we know to want something or not. But I had never thought about temptation touch points before. Mm-hmm. And you're right. We are at a level where there is almost no way to escape them. We're here in New York City today. They're everywhere.
Can I tell you something really evil?
Yeah.
So I started my career on Wall Street, but the second part of my career that is talked about a lot less is that I worked at BuzzFeed. And I literally worked in digital media strategy sales. And that is a fancy way of saying I worked with companies to put ads online. So maybe they were custom pop-ups in Flatiron, like in real life, or maybe they were custom joint business ventures. But the lowest and simplest level of an advertising partnership is a standard banner. There are different sizes. You go to any sort of website, a news media site, you'll see a big old banner or a little banner at the top, depending on how their website's formulated. You'll see one on the right-hand side. You'll see one halfway through the article, whatever. And what they do is there are pixels. As you know, every single web page is made up of all of these little colored crystal pixels, so you can actually see stuff, read stuff. But if you go to, I'll just give an example, I don't know, a shoe website, and you're like, oh, I need this pair of heels, but I'm not going to buy them because it's out of budget. That website has put a very sticky pixel. Imagine it's like an Apple AirTag. They just popped it in your pocket. And then when you go and read an article on the Washington Post, or you go to a article on the Wall Street Journal, you're like, wow, these shoes, they're following me around the internet. It must be, a divine intervention. Like, I need to have these shoes. No, babes. I put that pixel on the internet to track you. Like, we are literally fighting against so many more forces than our parents had to. And it isn't our fault, but we do have to be smarter. And I think media literacy right now is such a big part of financial literacy, because if you don't think about why someone is incentivized to show you something, you won't know why they bothered to do it in the first place.
God, that's good. I you know what? I know about pixels, but I never think about the fact that, in sales, they famously say you have to have 12 touch points in order to get somebody to sell something. And that used to be hard to get 12 touch points. Now, I go to Nordstrom's, I like shoes, and I'm on 17 websites plus Zuck knows me better than my man.
Yeah.
He's got my Christmas list. So that's actually, it's a really good point, because I think a lot of times everybody's like willpower, discipline. But if the odds are stacked against you, that's pretty hard.
And did you know willpower is actually the only muscle that gets weaker the more you use it? You go to the gym, you do bicep curls, you do squats, I lift heavy. Every week, I can lift a little bit more. Every muscle gets a little bit stronger the heavier I lift, the more often I do it. Willpower? No. The more times you tempt yourself, the worse your willpower is. That's why in the morning, you're like, yes, I will have a light breakfast. And then at night, you're elbow deep in a bucket of mac and cheese.
That's never happened to me ever. No, of course not.
No, certainly not. Never. Not to us.
No, I was laughing today. I was in a workout in the morning and with a girlfriend, and my team wanted to film some of it. And she was laughing because she's like, you're so much more serious right now in front of this camera. I didn't even realize it, but I guess I fuck around a lot when it's not there. But the point is, like, I don't even want to do the workout all the time. I don't want to be financially responsible all the time. So I guess you have all this inside information, from your time on Wall Street and JP Morgan and in advertising. Let's go back there for a second. Like, tell me what else. Like, what was one of the biggest lies that you found when you were at JP Morgan? Like, what lies are we told right now about finance that we don't even realize?
I will say one of the biggest lies is just that it's rude to talk about money. I cannot tell you the amount of money conversations I heard for the first time in my life sitting on that desk as a 22-year-old with literally negative $4. And it was crazy to me because we're positioned as, hey, if you talk about money, it's gauche. It's very tacky. You shouldn't be doing that. But I would sit there and listen to the traders compare what the private schools that they sent their kids to cost. And I would hear them compare, oh, which mortgage lender gave you a better rate? Pass me that guy's email. And then I would hear them say, hey, on the street, I was on the equities desk. When you trade a certain list of stocks, you are not personally allowed to invest in those companies. It's a conflict of interest, financial disclosures. We would literally have traders be like, man, if I was a betting man, I would put on this trade, but I can't because I work on this pad or like this list. People were literally giving each other ideas that they personally could not benefit from. They would constantly be talking about money. And that was the craziest thing. For people who are in the beginning of their financial journey, the hardest feeling is feeling like you don't have enough money. But once you get to that level, on Wall Street, what I learned is people have a harder time finding opportunities to actually deploy that capital. They're trying to give that money away faster than they can spend it. But you know what? It has to be a good opportunity. It has to earn them something back. It has to be worthwhile or additive for their life. But I really do think there's power in having that conversation.
The inside of the richest rooms, they talk about it all. I mean, when I was at Goldman in finance, they did what was called a club deal. And I never knew what a club deal was. And that just meant like, oh, I guess it came from the 19th hole, like the golf course. Yeah. So the clubs where all these dudes would go, they would sit and talk about deals. Hey, I'm going to invest in this real estate thing. You guys want to get in? That's where I learned the first term syndicate. Oh, that's when a group of us all get together. And I realized, oh, some of the best deals, they're never for the public. They're only behind closed doors.
That's that friends and family.
Right. And in the beginning, you can't even really have that matter to you because you're in survival mode. But I think it's really important to often know what's behind the closed doors that nobody even knows about.
I think it's important to eventually be in the room that it happens, but you have to know that room exists first. And I had never seen it. Like I grew up very much middle class. My parents were both immigrants. I was the first generation kid. Like we didn't have these conversations at the dinner table. But what I noticed was those conversations were being led by the third generation trader. It's not even that he had money. His dad had money and grandpa had money too. And so it's almost woven into your DNA to be comfortable having these conversations when for the most of us, we're just not born into that.
Yeah. Do you have a philosophy on old money versus new money?
Absolutely. I think the difference is social capital, and I'll explain. So basically, when I was young, my parents were not consuming content. They were literally just working and trying to survive. And so when I would go to school on the Monday and people would be like, oh my God, the Ravens, they won this week. I'd be like, the Ravens, what is that? Like I didn't know what the football team was. Or they'd be like, yeah, like my favorite band, like the Beatles. I'd be like, the Beatles? Like, what is that? And it was always like, even as I got older, it was like, have you seen this movie? Like, no, I have not seen that movie. Sorry, my Chinese-speaking parents have not shown me the greatest 100 movies of, our time. Like, I did not have those unspoken things that made you cool. And I thought when I finally got to Wall Street, when I had gotten, that great education and gotten to this private zone, that I was finally in the club. I wasn't even on the same block as the club. And so unfortunately, I learned a lot more lingo there. So when guys would say, yeah, this weekend we're heading out east. East of where? That's code, by the way, for the Hamptons. Or it was something along the lines of, when we ski in Zermatt and we go to Gestad and there's Courchevel. Like, I didn't even know how to spell these words, much less knew where they were. And there was this essentially club, unspoken, that you had to be a part of. Your dad had to have taken you to that ski resort, or your mom's family had to have had the house in Montauk. Like you were summering there. Summer is a verb, by the way. Never heard it before that.
Me neither.
And for me, I would say now I'm proudly new money, because when I think about all of these little touch points and this if you know, you knows, it feels a little cheap. It feels like you're buying friendship. You're buying access. And what I love about being new money is that I'm tacky. Like, I don't want to stay at the bed and breakfast in, New Hampshire that Papa had a steak in. Like, I don't want to stay there. Like, I want to stay at the newest, nicest place with 1,000 thread count sheets. I want it because I can afford it. I want it not because it's tasteful, not because it's quiet, subtle. I want it because I can have it.
I love that. Very unapologetic. It makes a lot of sense why millions of people follow you on the internet, because I think it's also refreshing. There is this like movement to try to be something that you're not. Like you get money and then become something different. But I do think, like, to your point on rich people speaking differently, it's really hard to learn the inner workings of a culture if you don't speak the language. Yeah. So if you don't speak the language of the wealthy, well, then it's kind of hard to become wealthy. Mm-hmm. And so it's almost like you have to learn these words, and not just the fancy summering things, but you have to learn the words like we were talking about it before, 2 and 20, LP, GP, like all of these words in finance keep people away. And part of your mission to me that's so important is like you seem to constantly, when I see your videos come up, you're like, let me explain what's actually happening here. And I'm going to take it from, MBA at Harvard down to the rest of us who never knew about this. Mm-hmm. And so I guess I would be curious. You had one video I really liked, but like, even about how do rich people keep money in the family? Yeah. Can we talk about that?
Yeah. I mean, listen, rich people's idea of wealth is very us-based. And I'm talking truly wealthy people. It's like, this is an heirloom passed down from grandpa. This is how we're going to make sure that your kids' college is paid for. And learning that is part of the generational wealth. The generational wealth is not just money being passed down. It's me passing down knowledge that I have, that I maybe, if I was the generation to make the money, I had to break my back and learn things the hard way. I don't want that for you, because I want you to be better than me. I want you to be richer than me. And so I think the number one thing that rich people do that regular people don't is that they strategically, financially choreograph their life and how their money lives. So let me explain what that means. Basically, this financial choreography is how your money will move at certain points in your life. Maybe I have a desire to pass money down to my daughter, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to pass this down in a very specific way. You're going to get some money when you choose a school to attend. You're going to get some money when you decide to buy a home. You're going to only get any money if you make sure to sign a prenup. There are certain things that rich people are asking of their heirs so that their fortune is not spoiled, that regular people leave up to chance. And that's the problem. The people in your life, and frankly, you, are the liability. You are the person who has that lowered willpower. You are the person who might not make a smart decision one day just because you had a bad day or because you're tired. But when you choreograph, and I keep saying that, it's like a dance routine. When you choreograph your money in your life, you've taken all the thought out of it because you've waited for a sunny day when you were in the right state of mind to make smart decisions that you know will pay off in the long run.
This is a secret nobody shares. I've done thousands of deals, but until now, I've never shared the most valuable 10% publicly because I want to buy these businesses myself. Then I realized that if you guys buy the businesses, I get to do the deals with you. So this year at Main Street Millionaire Live, it is your chance to see our insider strategies. I'll teach you how we find, buy, and scale a business step by step with the frameworks that I literally use to buy all these businesses. So if you want to go from an aspiring owner to someone actually running a profitable business, join me. I'll give you my blueprint, and maybe we end up doing deals together.
Let's talk prenups. Do you think everybody should get a prenup?
Yes.
What are the details? Why and how would you set up a prenup?
Well, Cody, because if you don't get a prenup that you make yourself, you still get one, and the government gets to write it. And I don't care if you are left, right, center. I do not trust the government to know me and my partner as well as I do. Nobody should know me and my partner as well as me and my partner do. And so I feel like the nasty phrase thrown around prenups is like, oh, you don't trust me? Like, you think this is just we're going to get divorced? No. But like, you buy car insurance, don't you? You buy home insurance. You buy health insurance. You planning on getting into a crash, losing your home, or getting sick? No. This is just a security blanket. It is essentially insurance. And why it's so important to me is because it can be so tailored to your relationship. So I'll tell you what's in my prenup. My partner and I, when we first started dating, he made a lot more money than me. He covered all of our expenses. He was very generous. And ultimately, because he spent so much more of his money and I saved so much more of mine, when we bought our home, we didn't put in 50-50 amounts. But I wanted to make sure that we were still 50-50 on the house because I only had that money because he took care of me. And that's a loving thing to do. So everything going into our relationship that we have, 50-50. All assets, cash, everything, while we're married, 50-50. The only carve out being the equity and ownership in my business. Because if something were to happen, I would not want my ex-husband having any sort of ownership stake or say in how I run Your Rich BFF. And I think this is so powerful because the biggest thing a prenup can do is protect you. Think about if you are a stay-at-home parent. You are making a huge sacrifice in your personal career. You are doing endless unpaid labor that is so critically important to a family. Your family can't run if you don't do that work. But if you are not making a traditional income and you do not have some sort of protection in place, what happens in 10 years when maybe, say, you get cheated on? You're going to walk away with nothing. The only reason your partner was able to go out and work hard and earn that money is because you took care of everything at home. Whatever your prenup says, it should feel just. And I'm not saying equal, I'm saying fair. Because based on what you are bringing in and what you plan on contributing during the life of the marriage, you should have a clear way to divide that.
Yeah, I'm having dinner tonight with James Sexton. Do you know him? Mm-hmm. I'm obsessed
Divorce
with James.
lawyer.
Yeah,
Wow.
we've become buddies. He's close with my husband. They're both like jujitsu guys. But he says the same thing. And it's, once you've pierced the veil of finance, you realize the world of money. Once you pierce through the veil of divorce, same thing. I'm divorced previously and then happily remarried. But it was awful. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was awful. It was probably one of the hardest things I've ever been through. And I lost a ton of money and time and pain and sorrow and whatever because we didn't actually do that. Mm-hmm. We did not have a prenup. And so I think there's always an exit tax to freedom, but it's such good advice that, again, is not very PC to share. And I'd be curious, let's go non-PC again. You and your husband both work.
Yeah.
I think it's very controversial these days. What should a woman do? What should a man do? I'm sure you get called a power couple too. I never know what to do with that term. Yeah. I'm always like, I think we're just both working, which is sort of normal. But what do you think should be the traditional relationship between man and woman in this world of making money and taking control of the house?
I think it's whatever works for you. And I hate to give a wishy-washy answer, but throughout the course of our relationship, things have changed. When we first started dating, I mentioned that he made a lot more money than me. And I had a lot more free time at the beginning because he was in investment banking. So he worked even longer hours than I did. That meant I picked up a little bit more slack at home. That's fine. But eventually we got to parity. That was probably year 5 of our relationship. And then when I started Your Rich BFF and it blew up, and now that I'm the breadwinner, there have been moments where I am busier than him, and I am so grateful to come home and he's like, oh, by the way, I've washed all of your yoga pants, so you don't have to keep wearing the same pair again. That's weird, Vivian. This is day 5. You need to pick a new pair. And so I think things can change throughout the course of your life. But if your partner is not willing to have that conversation, if there's just some default expectation that you will always be doing XYZ forever into perpetuity, it seems like you may not be in the right relationship. There's going to be moments, and there have been moments recently, even now that I'm the breadwinner, where my husband is just swamped. And I know he's swamped. So I make sure when he comes home, dinner is ready, whether I ordered it or I made it. But I need to take care of him. And he needs to take care of me, and we need to take care of ourselves individually for the other person too.
Yeah. Well, it's freeing because I think, these days there's all these gender norms but simultaneously now we're working too. And so, for me, I'm like with my husband, we both work together in the business. So it's both of our businesses now. But Lord help me, if I was the one that was always responsible for having to do the cooking and cleaning, of which I'm completely inept. I'm pretty clean, but cooking, absolutely not. That's him. He goes out, he buys the groceries. He loves cooking. He's a total mini chef, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
And he gives zero fucks. He's like, he's so masculine. He's like, I'm not emasculated by this. I don't care. But I think for a lot of people, these gender norms, you kind of get caged in them. And I've seen them happen to my girlfriends who work. And it always hurts my heart a little bit.
Can I also say something that's probably a little controversial?
Yes, please.
When you do something for free, a woman does it. When you get paid to do something, a man does it. So when you cook at home, you're the one who's expected to do it. The wife cleans, the wife cooks. Tell me why there are so many significantly more Michelin-starred male chefs than there are women. Why? Because suddenly it's your little passion project to make glazed pork belly and have an arm tattoo sleeve? Like, why? Why is that your career? Why does that get to be a thing that you are highly paid for to have your restaurant group? But when mama does it at home, you should be doing that. That's unpaid labor. Lame.
Yeah, it's very weird. But, I do think it's changing. Like one benefit, I think, I see people, business owners, men and women coming together every single day. I think the problem is you just can't be expected to do both. Like if I'm working all day, I'm not coming home and then doing all the housework too. That's unhinged.
Well, I think the safe thing to say is that if you want a traditional wife, then you have to be a traditional man. And you want to talk about a wife who cooks and cleans and has a hot meal on the table ready for, because back in the day, we could also all survive off of your one income, and we could still go on vacation twice a year. We had a white picket fence home, a golden retriever named Rover, and our 2 kids could still go to college, and you could pay for all that. If you can go to work and do all that for us, I'm happy. Happy to vacuum the house every day. I'm happy to cook dinner. I'm happy. But if you can't, and all of a sudden, I also got to work all day and come home, I also need a wife. Like, I too would like a wife who would do that for me. But you know what? If you are both making income, if you are both working, you gotta pick up slack together. And what we actually do in my house is we basically only do the chores that we hate the least. So my husband, his nightmare is going to a grocery store. I don't know if it's overstimulating for him, but he's like, I forgot what we were supposed to get. I don't want to be here. My nightmare is doing laundry. And it doesn't bother him. He's like, Viv, it's so easy. You just throw it in and then you go. The machine does it for you. And I'm like, yes, but this is now a 4-hour task. I'd rather go do something that's more immediately laborious for a shorter period of time. And so we divvy up our chores based on what we hate least.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah. It's actually really good because normally I might just bitch at my husband about the thing that I want him to do.
Yeah.
I'm a countertop freak. I hate a bunch of stuff out.
We could never be married.
Really?
I am disgusting.
Oh my God. I think we always marry the person that triggers us the most.
Yes.
It's probably so I can learn patience and that doesn't matter. But I lose it. And so much so that my husband now has a saying he always says to me, he always goes, don't touch my stuff. And I'm like, because I'm like that OCD person behind the husband cleaning it up as he's trying to make a meal. It's unhinged. And so, but I like the idea, instead of me yelling at him all the time, I just need to take care of it. And so it's this same thing. It's so good. Okay. What about, I want to talk a little bit about, you talked about things that you hate, and that's how you choose what to do. What if somebody hates budgeting? Mm-hmm. What do you do if you're a person that hates budgeting, but you have to save?
It's a reframe. I think budgeting needs to get a new PR team, because budgeting, I feel is so looked down upon. It's budgeting is going to tell me no. Budgeting is the reason I can't do anything. No. Budgeting is the reason you can go out with your girlfriends for drinks and not worry when the bill comes that your card's going to be declined. Budgeting is the reason you can afford to go on that vacation and not be like, is this pina colada going to set me over the edge? Budgeting is the reason why you get to have the experiences you want out of your life. And so I think first, we got to reframe. But second, if we're going to be practical here, I like a finger to the wind budgeting strategy, which is just the 50-30-20. So your take-home pay 50% of it goes towards needs. I'm talking housing, I'm talking utilities, transportation if you got to use it to get to and from work, basic groceries. 30% goes towards the wants. So this is dining out, entertainment, seeing friends, getting drinks, whatever. And then 20%, I always say, is taking care of future you. And that covers all things like saving, debt, pay down, investing, all of those things. And the hope is that over time, this isn't going to stay 50, 30, 20 forever. The hope is that, as you make more money, as your investments start generating more income for you, the 50 and the 30 become a smaller proportionate amount of what you are having come in the door. And that 20 can actually become a larger and larger percentage of what your money is used towards.
So like back when you were paycheck living, like if somebody's listening right now and they're like, all right, I'm going to do this. Vivian seems smart. She was on Wall Street. I'm going to listen to her. What would that look like? Like, what did you do when you got a paycheck in order to start saving? What is the step-by-step that someone should do?
Yeah, there was no step-by-step, because if there was a step-by-step, it wasn't going to happen. So in New York City, I remember this too so vividly, because you get 2 paychecks a month. And I was living paycheck to paycheck my first year, working on Wall Street, which is so ridiculous because the rent was so high, my expenses were so high just because it was so expensive to live here. One of the paychecks, immediately I knew was going to rent, and then it was gone. But what I would do is in the portal, where it's like day one, they sit you down for orientation. They're like, hey, give us all of your information, your bank account, routing number so we can pay you, da-da-da. You give them your checking account. And then you never think about it again, but you can actually go and change that. So if you go into your workplace portal, you can change where your paycheck gets deposited. And what I ultimately had to do was automatically set aside 10% of my every single paycheck to go somewhere else. Yeah. Because when it was out of sight, it was out of mind. And then I was able to say, well, I only have this much left. This is how much I can spend. And so there was no temptation when I knew I didn't have the money. But all the while, my savings account is getting bigger and bigger. And at a certain point, I pivoted from even just saving to investing. And so I think taking all of the willpower, we talked about this, out of it. You don't want to build willpower. You can't. You want to build infrastructure, choreography. Because once you have those dance moves in place, there's no guesswork.
Yeah. It's funny because even in business, we teach the same thing. We have an idea that businesses should be profitable. I know it's shocking, but a lot of times we're business owners and we pay ourselves last, and then we allocate to new things and we're investing in our business, right? Well, most businesses never sell. Most businesses do not have an end date. They just close. So if you think about it that way, you're not paid along the journey at all, then that's really problematic. And so I have the same belief that in business, you should take the first 10% of every dollar that you make and you put that in your bank account, not in your business's bank account, in your bank account. And it's really painful for business owners to do because they're like, I'm going to run out of money. I have to spend all of this.
If you're going to run out of money, you might need to change some parts of your business.
100%. It's just financial discipline as opposed to willpower, which I think is a real differentiator. But let's actually talk about this. So you've got your cash allocation, your cash investment now. I never really knew how much money to keep on the sidelines. So like how much is too much cash to have sitting and how much should you have?
I think there's a number of different levers that I think about. So the first lever is typically what you as an individual, your demographic is. If you are single as a Pringle, you are just worried about yourself, you and your pet rock, 3 to 6 months of living expenses in a high yield savings account is usually appropriate. If you're a head of household, you got kids, maybe you're part of a family, 6 to 12 is probably a little bit safer. But now let's talk the levers. If you have a more traditional W-2 job, then you might be able to get away with the lower end of that range because it's probably easier to find replacement work. You're a freelancer? You're going to want a little bit more buffer. So that lever goes that way. But then it's like, finding a entry to mid-level job, there's dozens of them. But if you're more senior in your career, the job hunt might take 2 years before you find the right fit. So you might need to be on the higher end of that range if you are more senior in your career. And so there's all of these different levers, or maybe it's like, hey, one of your children has special needs. That payment to whatever service or whatever sort of private schooling or something cannot stop. You're going to want to be on the higher end of that range. You have to think about your life and where you fall. I like to do the 3 to 6 and 6 to 12 months as a jump off point, but then you need to pull all of your own levers and decide if you need to be on the lower end of that range, the higher end of that range, or maybe even bump above, or, where you need to live to feel safe. Mm-hmm. That money is not for today. That money, essentially what it buys you is time. If you no longer have money coming in the door, how long could you last with your current lifestyle? And that is what the emergency fund actually gets you.
Yeah, what's wild is how few people know that. I mean, we were playing a little game on the internet a couple of weeks ago where we were asking people, what is your hourly rate? Mm-hmm. Most people actually don't know that. And then what is your monthly expenses? More people know that substantially, but they don't actually realize what is the gap between what you make, what your monthly expenses are, and what your eventual, hey, I need to have 6 or 12 months.
Yeah.
And so this monetary gap is what kills you. And it sort of feels like the more successful, specialized, or skilled you are, the bigger amount of savings you have to have. Mm-hmm. So it's a really useful reframe. What other thing that I love about you is you're so framework oriented, which makes things easier to remember for people, and me included, because I'm very forgetful. So when you're thinking about personal finance and budgeting, are there other frameworks that you're like, why don't people know this? I need to tell them about it. And obviously they need to follow you for that too. But what other frameworks do you have about saving, investing, or making money that everybody needs to know?
I like to help people calculate their fuck you number.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
I love it.
This is
what
super
does
fun.
This even mean? Okay, fun.
Okay, so if you're driving your car, don't do this. But if you are seated somewhere safe, close your eyes for a second and imagine your perfect year. You get to live where you live. You get to travel wherever you want to travel. Maybe you're helping out, kids. Maybe you have a pet that you want to have. You can have a shopping budget, all of those things. Now ask yourself, realistically, and don't lie, how much would that 1 year cost you? Then we take that number. You can whip out your handy dandy iPhone calculator. You divide that number by 0.04. That is representative of 4%. And the reason we use that is because 4% represents an incredibly conservative return on your investments. So this is what you can decently get right now from a high yield savings account, which is effectively risk-free. So we're pretty confident you can get this return. The number that you get, that you've now just calculated, is what you would want to have invested. And at that point, you could tell your boss, fuck you, and quit. Because your investments would be able to sponsor your lifestyle. And you could have that lifestyle into perpetuity, never eating into that nest egg, because how much that nest egg would earn you every year would cover your expenses.
So hot. Also, it's a fun game.
It's such a fun game. Do it with your partner. We like to fantasize a little bit. And I'm like, okay, so if I'm living on a private island in Bora Bora, yeah, you can do that. It's fun. But also, it's realistic, because if you don't know what goal you're trying to go towards, you're just running into the horizon and hoping for the best.
Yeah. And I think it helps you not get so scared about money, because if you can move into the creativity zone, it's way harder to have the scarcity, the, lack zone. So I love that. Maybe that's a fun way to start out the new year. Yeah. Even just imagining it and feeling like, it was funny. My husband and I the other day were looking at some of the greats that we follow, like Napoleon, Alexander the Great, Marcus Aurelius, like old school guys. And he came up with an interesting assertion, which is that none of them actually ever hit their goals. They had crazy goals. I mean, Napoleon wanted to take over the world. Marcus Aurelius wanted to revive the Roman Empire. And they never actually hit them. But their goals were so big that where they fell was pretty cool.
Shoot for the moon, land among the stars.
Very true. Yeah. Napoleon, genocide and take over the world version.
Crazy.
Small little issue. Okay. I want to talk now about money and relationships in some ways. So let's say, for instance, that you're about to marry somebody. You're really considering it.
Yeah.
What money questions do you always ask somebody before you marry them?
Let's do a little Foursquare. These are the 4 things you need to know. You need to know what you make, what you have, what you owe, and what you spend. So this is going to talk about income. You should know what your partner makes. I think that's a pretty simple one. You should know what assets your partner has, debts, what you owe. You need to know all of those things. And then also just generally what you spend on, because I feel like that is such a representation of who you are as a person. And I think One of the great frustrations I have with finance and relationships is that nearly 50% of couples don't talk about money until they're engaged. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, I did. I talked about all of it.
Yeah.
Did you talk about all of it?
I talked about finance with my husband, my now husband, 30 days into our relationship because I moved into a cockroach-infested apartment and I basically needed him to bail me out of it and like let me live with him after knowing me for 30 days. But I had to be like straight up, this is how much money I have. This is how much money I make. I don't have any more money. I'm about to break this lease. It's going to cost me $8,000. It was all the savings I had at the time. Please help me. And it was so pathetic. I felt so like just weak, small, lonely. And he responded with such warmth and kindness and understanding. And he told me all of his numbers. And this is not to say that we are the perfect couple, but one thing we have never fought about is money.
Is there like a number where you think, Lord, if that's what their credit score is and that's how much debt they're in, don't do it? Is there like a breaking point?
I don't think that there is a breaking point, but it does make me wonder. Because my question for you is this. If you are a grown adult with a credit score that low or a debt number that high, why haven't you made a plan to fix that? Because if you don't have a plan to improve those things, maybe it doesn't bother you. Maybe you're okay living like that. I'm not. I want to make sure that we can eventually buy a home together, or we can eventually get a family car, or I'd like to go on vacation. God forbid. I want to relax one time ever. But like, if you are going to legally tie yourself to someone, especially knowing that there are places that are community property states, like you might have to assume somebody's debt if they take on a secret credit card while you guys are married. If you already have problems managing your overall financial health, that doesn't bode well for us. And it doesn't bode well for a lot of other things. In the same way that like if someone is willing to lie to you about secret credit card debt, they're probably going to lie to you about other things.
I mean, it's really hard conversations now, easy life later.
Exactly.
And so you can have the heart up front or you can have it later. And Lord, I wish somebody would have told me that.
That
in
is
many ways.
That was ingrained in you, by the way, by Latina parents or Latino parents. Because my mom always told me, she was like, you can't have fun 2 days in a row. So it's like you could either do your homework today or do your homework tomorrow. And you could go see your friend today or see your friend tomorrow, but you could never see your friend 2 days in a row.
That's amazing. Also such like an Asian mom thing. I feel like it's so good. I want to talk about like, okay, this is a little bit granular, but let's get granular. Beginning of the year. Let's say that your partner does make way more money than you do or way less. Do you split things 50-50 or how do you have that conversation with your partner about who pays for what?
Yeah, you can split it 50-50 if you want to break up. No, listen, I am someone who doesn't believe in things being equal. They have to be equitable. Because say we're dating and you make $250,000 a year and I make, I don't know, let's call it $80,000 a year. We go and get an apartment together and the rent is, $4,000 a month. That is a huge proportion of my income, right? $80,000 after taxes, you're probably looking at maybe $60,000 if we're lucky. $2,000 a month times 12, $24,000. $24,000 of $60,000 is what? A third? Over a third. $24,000 of $250. Let's say you walk away with $175. Oh, that's weird. That seems to be a much smaller fraction. No, we are not paying a commensurate amount on our rent. Because of that, I am shouldering a larger burden than you are, even though we are paying the same. And the problem with that is over time, that leads to a lot of resentment because you know what's going to happen? You're going to pay the rent and then you're going to go about your merry way. You're going to go to sushi dinner. You're going to be able to go on vacation. You're going to buy nice clothes. I only have $36,000 left that I'm working with. I'm not going out to sushi dinner. So then I'm going to tell you, hey, I don't want to go out to date night. You're going to think I'm a killjoy. I can't afford to go on vacation. So now you have to go by yourself and I'm just sitting at home like hating you via Instagram. Like I will build so much resentment towards you because you are living in a completely different universe than me. I think every couple should split things in an equitable fashion. That can be proportional, doesn't have to be. That can be, one partner just says, I'm going to cover it all because you make so much less than me that I want you to save and invest your money. A great example of this, Tyler Cameron actually told me that he was paying a lot of expenses and bought his girlfriend a new car because she got into a really scary car accident. And when he told me all of that, he made a comment. He's like, yeah, that's probably not great financial advice. And I was like, well, actually, I think it is great. Because if you really think that you are going to have a deep relationship with this person, you want to take care of them and do right by them. And if you're making meaningfully more money and it's no problem to you, why not set your partner up for financial success so that when, hopefully things do progress down the line, you're both in a healthy financial state?
Yeah, it's fascinating because I think this conversation will help if you're struggling with it. This is such a mathematical way to explain how to split things. And oftentimes we don't talk about it. Then if you do talk about it, you talk about it generally like, well, I feel like I can't pay for all of this. That's not a very useful way to have a conversation. If instead you could say, well, here's a way we could do it proportionally. Here's why I think it makes sense. It's kind of like a masterclass. So if I was struggling with how to do something with my partner, I would use your words. And
it's so crazy too, because when it's things that are not money, it's never this challenging. So when my husband and I order a pizza, we do not split this pizza down the middle. I know for a fact that he is probably, 60 pounds heavier than me. He naturally is going to need more calories to feel full. He's taller than me. He's bigger than me. So yeah, if I give him an extra slice, I don't feel jilted, right? That's my allocation of pizza. You would never feel that way.
Nope.
But when it comes to dollars, all of a sudden people they get their pants in a bunch. Yeah. And I think if we think about money as care, people become a lot less sensitive to it.
Yeah. You also make money fun. The name of your new book is Well Endowed. And I LOL'd when you first gave me a copy of the book because, when money is either a game or mathematical or fun, it's just easier to talk about. There's some emotional burden that comes off of talking about money. So I want you to talk about it because I think this book is important for people. What is in Well Endowed? What are they going to get out of it? Why do people need to read it?
Yeah. So I think it'll make a lot of sense when I explain the title. Even though being well endowed is a general crass joke that we make, if you actually look at the phrase well endowed, it is in reference to an endowment. And you've probably heard this word before. You've heard of Harvard's endowment, or maybe a big donor gave your favorite charity a pot of money to use, and now the charity has an endowment. What does an endowment actually mean, and what does it do? It is essentially resources and funds that allow an organization to further its mission into perpetuity for the rest of time and achieve their goals. That is exactly what I want to do with every individual person. Because oftentimes I feel like our generation is spending money on shit that we don't actually want to impress people we don't actually like with money we don't have. And so you end up looking at yourself one day, you wake up one day and you're like, I hate my job. I don't have anything to show for all of those years of work. And my life really didn't pan out the way that I wanted it to. And so what this book teaches you to do is, one, understand consumerism. Two, navigate some of the biggest deals of your life, whether it's buying a home or a car or insurance. Learning how to actually navigate finances with a partner. How to maybe set your kids up for financial success. Get to your happily ever retirement. And then still be able to build an estate plan to leave something behind on this earth once you're gone, whether it's for Fluffy, your favorite pet dog, whether it's for your 2.5 kids, whether it's for your partner, whether it's for the rest of your family. I want you to feel like you got the most out of this life and we're still able to pass something on.
Oh, that's so good. I know what I'm going to do with my first $20 here, which is I'm going to spend it on this book. But let's say that somebody listening is like, they have $10K.
Yeah.
They have 10K to allocate. It is their, investment money or whatever. What do you think somebody should do besides buy the book with your first $10,000?
First and foremost, nearly half of the country has it. So what we're doing is we're paying off our high interest rate debt. And that is, my friends, credit cards. We are getting rid of that debt. The reason why credit cards can become so nefarious is because the APR on them is so high, usually somewhere between 20 to 30%, meaning that debt is compounding fast. So
APR meaning the interest rate.
Yes, APR being the interest rate every year. You want to make sure you wipe that because that debt can grow faster than the vast majority of investments that you can even make. Once you have that in a good spot, I want you to think about different time horizons. So maybe you want to have really long-term investments. Those are the ones for retirement. Perhaps it's something simple as putting your money into a target date retirement fund. All you have to do is calculate the year where you turn 65, round to the nearest year ending in 5 or 0, and then just picking, Vanguard, target date retirement fund, and then the year that you just calculated. Perhaps then you got some shorter time goals. And maybe that's, I need to think about investing in a 529 because I want my son to be able to go to school and I'd like to help with that. Not only do you get a state tax benefit for you in 30 plus states, but also that money grows tax-free, can be used for educational expenses tax-free. If your kid ends up being some sort of football star and doesn't need the money, you can roll up to $35,000 of it into a Roth IRA for kiddo. And frankly, if you still have money left over, you can change the beneficiary of that account multiple times. You can become the beneficiary. Mama wants to take classes at the Culinary Institute. I'm going to go get my golf swing right at the Golf Academy. You do have to go somewhere that's accredited. It can't be like Uncle Tony's Golf Academy. It has to be like a legitimate place. But there's so many things that you can do, and it's a little bit of a near time horizon. And 3, I think look into creative ways to invest. We just had an incredible conversation about deal making, buying boring businesses, but also thinking about investing in your short term. So it's like, okay, well, I don't love my job. Like, what am I going to do to get a better one? Maybe it's I have to go get that sort of MBA if I'm in consulting and I need to move up that ladder because at a certain point, those 3 letters are going to make a difference in certain industries. Not all of them, but some of them. Maybe it's, man, I'd really like this specific skill set. Maybe I can find a place that can teach me how to do that, whether it's design, whether it's, understanding editing. It's all of these things. Invest in yourself for the short term because yes, I always say you can start with $5, you can start with $10. Investing is easy, yes. But the more money you have invested, the stronger it becomes. It's very literally a snowball rolling down a hill. And so at the beginning, it actually even makes more sense to invest in yourself so that you can have more money coming in the door. And when you have more dollars coming in the door, you have more money to put towards those longer term investments.
Do you believe in passive income? Do you think that's real?
I do, but I don't think it's as described on the internet. Like objects in mirror are better than they appear. So, you hear people talk about like, you can just buy foreclosed home. Shut up. That is not passive. You are doing a lot of steps. You're doing a lot of work. You're probably going to have to do some sort of fixing on the house. That's not passive. You got to do stuff. Then there's like, you can just be an Amazon dropshipper. Do you know how much crap inventory is going to be at your house that you're going to be like sending out, like whatever? Like they're like, you can just drop it, ship it straight from the factory. And then you're like, you got to pay the factory. And then there's like so many 1,000 things that are wrong. And it's also like, you can be an affiliate marketer. So do you understand that affiliate marketing only works if you already have a large audience? Volume. And so there's so many things that are positioned as passive income that I think are crummy ideas, not because they don't work, but because they're not passive. They are active income. You have a job, you're doing work. The only, I think, truly passive income strategy, is ownership. You have to own something, whether that be a business that is making you money, whether that be investments in the stock market, whether that be a bond that is paying you interest for having borrowed your money. You have to own something.
Yeah, it's so true. I got ridiculed on the internet once because I said, recently I've said there's no such thing as passive income, except it is actually a tax code. Like there is such a thing as passive income. But what I meant when I said it originally was exactly that passive income doesn't exist in that I put in no money, I put in no time, I have no skills, and I just make money because of this brilliant strategy that somebody came up with. No, but I do own a bunch of businesses that I don't work in at all. And so do I get income checks that I don't work for? Sure. But it takes a lot of upfront work to get that passive income. Although in the stock market, you put the money in and passive income can happen. That is a literal tax bracket. So I totally agree with you.
In the same way that you're yeah, I'm collecting these checks, but you're not collecting those checks because of something you did just now. You had to put a lot of work in over the years. And it's the same way that it's when you hire someone who can do it in 10 minutes, you're not paying for the 10 minutes, you're paying for the years of experience that allowed them to do it in 10 minutes.
That's so true. It's that Pablo Picasso story. Okay, what I want to end on is, so all of these are incredible tactics. I always wonder, why do you think we have such emotional ties to money? You have people, I've seen it on the streets when I've hung out with you and we're walking here, somebody will walk up my rich BFF, give you a big hug, you're my favorite. And I think you probably also have a lot of the opposite, which is this will never work for me. I'll never be rich. I have no money. What has been your experience? Why do we feel like money is so emotionally burdensome to us, or some of us might never be able to get it?
Because in our society, money is a marker of success. And the way people treat me, I feel oftentimes is a mirror of how they feel about their own abilities. And so when people are thank you so much for teaching me this thing, it's not that they're necessarily just happy that I exist. They are happy that they have derived value and now see a light. That they're I'm going to follow this light. I'm going to make more money. I'm going to become more successful. And they see me as almost inspiration, I think, in that if I do these things, I too can make this kind of money. And I genuinely believe that if you are implementing the tips that I'm giving out in Well Endowed on social media, I will take you from a place where you previously were to somewhere better. Am I guaranteeing you the sun, the moon, and the stars? Not for everyone, but I promise you, you're going to end it better than you started. On the flip side, when people are this will never work, they're super defeatist, they're just woe is me, I think that is a projection of them feeling they aren't deserving or that they've never seen an accurate representation of someone that looks like them succeed. If I'm honest, I think I probably had that mentality for a very long time. Prior to probably meeting my mentor at my first job at JP Morgan, she was the first rich Asian woman I had ever met. And I mean rich. New Chanel bag every day, click-clacked in on the marble floors with the Gucci stilettos. I thought that was wealth. And I've learned over time that she is incredibly wealthy for a lot of other things other than her fashion collection. But seeing her succeed was the first time I could envision myself in that lived reality. Because the only rich people I had met up until that point were all white guys. And I say that lovingly. My husband is a white guy. But it was very hard to picture me in it until I saw it myself.
So true. Actually, you know what? My first rich mentor that was a woman was an Asian woman, Yang Butler. Total
Really?
shout out. Yeah, Filipino. And same thing. I remember when she told me when she moved, I was at State Street at the time. She's when I moved from San Francisco to, Boston, she's it's really hard, a lot of stuff that I had to move. She's the toughest part was getting the semi-truck outfitted for the wine collection because it had, I remember thinking, bitch got a wine collection?
Yeah.
I thought it came in a box, I just didn't even, but I loved watching her live her version of a rich life. And she was the same. She had lovely bags. She was beautifully sort of dressed. And I think she went to Harvard or MIT. I can't remember which one. So she had all the trappings, but she was first gen. And I got to watch her and learn from her. And she was the very first one that talked to me about investing my own money and getting up on the balcony and sort of seeing things from up high as opposed to being in the mix.
And I'm willing to bet that she probably at some point was generous to you in a way that no one else in your life had been in the past.
Oh, yeah.
I went over to my mentor's apartment one weekend. She was cleaning out her closet. She had a pair of YSL heels with a gold toe, and they were black heels, gold toe, very classic, beautiful. And I don't know why she had never worn these shoes. I think they might have been just a smidge too big for her or whatever. They weren't the right size, but she forgot to return them. Forgot to return a pair of $800 shoes. And she gave them to me. And that was my first real designer thing. Yeah. This was before I could buy my own. Like, those shoes allowed me to close my eyes and imagine.
It's so, and I think, for the people who follow you and the people who are listening, I think there's always two buckets. The person who's listening that needs to implement all this in their life and that hungrily wants their first pair of YSL. But there's also probably the person listening that already has all of this. And it's like the impact you can have on one young Vivian or Codie or whoever by being rich and showing that it's not always a bad thing, by being giving when you have it and sharing not just the stuff, but the knowledge is so beautiful. So truly, I think your movement is so important. I love following you on the internet. I've already told you that. I'm so excited for this book. I haven't gotten to read this one yet because it's brand new, but I read your last book and I'm just so glad you're here. And if you don't already follow Vivian on the internet, my rich BFF on all the social channels.
Your rich BFF.
Oh, she's mine.
Well, yeah.
It's mine, not yours. And then Net Worth and Chill podcast, which I was just on, really, really liked. You also have an incredible episode on there on private equity, which was near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
So thank you for being here, Vivian. This is amazing.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Yay. We are sitting on a generational wealth creation event. If you're here, this means you're a builder. As we're going through these next 3 days, I want you to know that the American dream starts with you guys by our little Main Street revolution.
And then I just want to give you guys permission to take a leap of faith.
If I knew then what I know now, I would probably do bigger deals.
It's given us an extra layer of security that we never would have had.
I am so excited to introduce you to some ordinary people doing extraordinary things.
We have to really take the time to make a meaningful connection. It's the fact that there is a lack of connection and the person just wants to be seen, heard, and understood.
Thanks for taking the question.
Are there extra things that need to be done when trying to paying off bad debt?
Great question.
I buy businesses so simple, even your grandmother understands them. That's the game.
It's you and me versus the problem. We're going to try to solve this together.
I know how to build trust in a very advanced way.
How does buying a business fit into the vision for your life?
Today, my goal is to teach you some fundamental skills that you can use to accelerate your business.
If you make a promise in the mirror, know that your word is freaking iron to you.
These people on Wall Street, they want to keep the normal people out of the game.
Main Street millionaires are all around this world, and it starts with each and every one of you. What are you waiting for? Your path to ownership starts now. Get your ticket to join us on Main Street. Join us today.
What is a think tank, and what influence do they even have on Washington? And what was your purview of seeing in through that lens to the center of power?
Yeah, and that's generally been my lens into that world. Is I've always been more of a policy person first and a political person second. I mean, when you work in a think tank, especially in Washington, D.C., you have to deal with politics because the people whose attention you're trying to get are politicians or their staff. Really it's political leaders and the media are kind of your two main audiences. And so a think tank is like a catch-all term for a certain type of organization, but they really exist along a continuum. And they're usually a combination of research, a general set of principles that the people who work there tend to agree on, and then a goal of taking that research and their commentary and their writing or their podcasts and to influence the public debate. So to change the way that policymakers are thinking about tax policy, education policy, what to think about Israel right now, how do we resource the effort in Ukraine or not, and all those things. And some think tanks are a little bit more political in the sense that they're really trying to influence how politicians in this particular cycle think. Some of them have sort of house views where all the scholars kind of have to sing off the same song sheet in their work. And then some of them, like the American Enterprise Institute where I was, the scholars, it's a little bit more like a university where the scholars are They have independence. They don't get told what to write or what to say. But they work at AEI for a reason. They believe in the principles of a free society. They're wary of regulatory intrusion into the commercial market space. So people would say, well, they're free market people, but they are. But they're across a continuum as well in terms of some will favor a particular type of regulation while others oppose it. And sometimes AEI scholars have disagreed in public, and I've always liked that about the place. But you see think tanks to the right, to the left, who are a little bit more politically driven in terms of their mission, but they all kind of get called think tanks because they generally bring people that have some kind of academic training or some kind of expertise within policy, and their goal is to influence the way that policymakers and the media think about those things.
Well, I don't think I realized before I started getting involved with any of this stuff that there's that joke in Washington, D.C. that all the policy is written by 20-year-old staffers.
Yeah, right.
And
far from the truth.
Right. What's interesting, I think, is as a person outside of the spectrum, you forget that half of the policies are like these 17,000 page, overwhelming pieces of paper to people who may only be in office for like 1 or 2 terms, really don't understand the political apparatus, don't know how to make real change. And so they might come to a place like AEI or reference your research to say, like, please pull me 15, different ideas on how to make a city more profitable and better to live in. But they're not pulling it from like the Wall Street Journal often. Right. They're pulling it from academic papers, just like a scientist or a doctor might do the same thing before they prescribe something for a patient, right? Is that kind of how that works?
I mean, there comes a point where if you are, just for example, writing the text for the 2017 tax reform bill, there were some crazy ideas in that original version. You're not going to actually figure out what to think reading really smart writers at the Wall Street Journal or whatever, because their job is to cover it rather than to do the analysis. And so at times like that, Hill staffers, some of whom are in their 20s, and then the more senior ones hopefully are older than that and have some expertise. Now, you have some long-standing members of committees on the Hill who really are policy experts, and everybody kind of looks to them. But then they'll look to a think tank like AEI or some of the others and ask the scholars who have expertise, say, in these aspects of tax policy, to come in and brief them on what their own analysis, their own modeling, their own regressions, like what they see if we include this one particular provision. And so all think tanks in Washington have a lot of public events, that, you can live stream them, you can come and hear scholars talk. But I always felt like the most important work that we did was the stuff that wasn't on camera. It was the stuff that was behind those closed doors in meetings where people were debating whether or not this particular provision would have this kind of effect on the economy. And that's where you have the most influence. I mean, during the COVID relief bills that, when we were all kind of trying to figure out what was going on with the pandemic and exactly what the right federal response should be. Again, a lot of bad ideas out there, and they needed to sift through exactly what the right kind of stimulus or not should be for the economy. And our scholars were involved in those discussions, and I think had an outsized influence on the results, whether you like them or not. I mean, that's when think tanks can really shine, is at times like that, where you realize there are people who realize this is a really big deal. Put politics aside right now. We're trying to figure out what the right policy is. And then you need some experts to come in and do that work. And in universities, where I am now, and I love the university world, and we're building something similar at the University of Texas. A lot of people that are tenured professors in a department, they don't have experience converting their research into kind of policy briefs or whatever. And that's what think tanks can do for them, is to take their research and make it digestible for people that are trying to figure out the consequences of some decision.
I love creating content, obviously. We post like 50 pieces of content across all my platforms each week. But if you've ever created content, you know the uphill battle it can be to ideate, write, produce, and film a video. And then you have to edit it all. So one of my favorite tools to use for this is Riverside. You've probably heard about it before. It's really revolutionized the podcast space by allowing creators all over the world to record 4K video regardless of the internet speed. But they've just released an update that any creator is going to love. So along with recording high quality video and audio, they've added in editing software so you can edit any video content directly in Riverside. If your team is a little more bougie like mine and wants to record the video themselves, you can upload your own content to Riverside so you can use all of their amazing AI tools. It can transcribe your video and add in customizable captions. It can analyze that transcript to cut out the dead space in the video. And my favorite part, they have this AI editor feature that will pull short form clips from my content so we can squeeze all the juice out of what we create. Time is money, and Riverside has given me and my team back loads of time, aka money. So I love them. And because I love you, I got you guys a deal. Try Riverside for yourself with the link in this episode's description. You can sign up for free using the link and discount code CODY at checkout for a discount on any paid plan. By the way, the first 1,000 people who click on this link and use the coupon code will get an exclusive 30% off with code CODY30 with the QR code on the screen. Even our doggo likes it. Let's get back to the episode.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I remember one of the more interesting things we ever did was we sat down at AEI and you guys put us through a war game with China and Taiwan. And before that, I didn't realize that that's what happened when we sometimes explain things to policymakers, where even that might be what happens inside of the Pentagon. Can you explain what a war game is?
Yeah, it's a way of creating in this case, a geopolitical sort of scenario, and giving people the opportunity to understand that if you make one particular decision, they invade, they don't, our response is this kind of air power, this kind of naval response. That means we're moving resources from some other part of the world, for instance, right? And so you actually start to realize what's involved in these decisions. It's always trade-offs, right? And so when you're engaged in kind of a large-scale military effort, it means there's other capabilities that you don't have elsewhere in the world. And so a war game, it kind of puts people in that scenario and makes you understand from a cost perspective, from a personnel perspective, what sorts of decisions that might seem easy if you're just watching a cable news show all of a sudden becomes super complex. And we've used it in other scenarios too. I mean, I worked in the George W. Bush White House for a few years, and I was there during Hurricane Katrina. And, we realized that there were certain war game scenarios that had been played out before that had relevance to that time. When you have 500,000 people displaced from an urban area, this was not too many years after 9/11, where we thought that something like a dirty bomb could happen. Like, what would happen if a radioactive bomb went off in a city and now all of a sudden 500,000 people couldn't live there anymore? What would you, first of all, there's the site, but then there's the dispersion of people. And we were faced with a situation because of what happened in New Orleans, that you basically did have 500,000 people no longer living there that went to Houston, or they went up to Tennessee, or they scattered about, and there wasn't a really great preset federal response for how to actually get resources to people so that they could, stay in hotels or pay their rent or get the resources that they need because of this horrific event. And you can use that type of war game precedent to actually make decisions. So it's helpful in terms of guiding policy, but it's actually really interesting to participate in, as you saw.
Wait, so how does that work? So basically, you're an advisor to the president at that time in the White House, and you guys are trying to figure out what to do with Katrina. Do you go to a file and you're like, here's all the historical war games we've done?
I wish
option one.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping for. I found that war game, there wasn't an exact war game that really prepared the federal government for that. I had kind of hoped that the dirty bomb scenario would create some off the shelf stuff. Yeah. Got us a little bit of the way there. But that was a situation of making policy kind of on the fly with imperfect information. And this is a time when you do also rely on policy experts around the country. I mean, we were calling people who had written papers about this type of scenario, who had studied what kinds of federal resources could be used most nimbly, and we had to make some decisions in a really short period of time. And President Bush wanted to have a really large response to this issue, and he had a plan of being out in New Orleans within 10 days, and we had to have a bunch of big policy proposals. So we made a lot of decisions really quickly. Some of them were mistakes, in terms of the right kind of federal response. But that's different than when you're preparing for a State of the Union address, maybe 6 months ahead of time, where you got a lot of time to plan. So you're always looking for outside expertise. No administration has all that expertise within the White House or within the Office of Management and Budget. It just doesn't exist within one administration. And so you're always looking for people outside who know more about this issue than you do, involving them in the policy process. And so that's where think tanks come in. It's where people that have a perch at a university who are really good come in. And you find in those jobs that you really need those people. I was there during the run up to the financial crisis too. There's a housing crisis that preceded the financial crisis, and that was the same thing where really, really smart, well-known, published economists had very different views about the reality of that situation. And it was really, really hard to know what to do, because some of the smartest people in the world whose advice you were relying on just saw this in sometimes 180-degree different ways from each other. But you still need to talk to those people, and you still need to make smart decisions. And if a White House is running well, it takes expertise actually very seriously.
Yeah, it's such a good point. I mean, my friend Tim Kennedy, do you know him?
I don't.
You should have him to Civitas. But he anyway, he's a active member of the military, but he was one of the people that went in for Pineapple Express, remember, in Afghanistan. And then he brought a group of people with Sabre allies to go get people out of North Carolina. And he was talking about what it looked like, on the ground there. But it's really interesting to think that, if you're in business, you might go to Harvard Business Review and look at the historical case studies and say, we have something going on here, like which other company has it ever been through? And you might pull some of those ideas to think like, could we solve it? I had never thought about, does the White House have like components that are like that?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, you find you get thrown into these jobs and everything's moving so fast and you have all the things that you're supposed to do that day. And then by 10 a.m., there's 4 more things that you hadn't planned on when you got up that morning to deal with. And so people's ability to focus for a long period of time on really important things is actually really limited. I mean, time is an amazingly scarce resource. And so having worked in that environment has given me a lot of sympathy for administrations that have come, after us, because when something big is happening in the world, and there's a lot of media criticism for what seems to be like double messaging coming out of the White House, or the administration doesn't seem to have its act together. I'm like, it's probably because they don't yet. Like they actually have had a couple advisors go out in front of cameras saying different things from each other. And maybe the president didn't even know they were out there saying that because they're trying to formulate a response. I mean, it sometimes just happens in sort of a chaotic way because of everything that's going on. So a smartly run administration kind of prepares for that. And you try to kind of pick your experts in advance, people that that you can trust, to get a good catalog of people around the country on a variety of issues, and hope your policy councils are all doing that. We used to have, like every summer, we would have the heads of think tanks from around Washington and also even outside, just handpick some of their own scholars and bring them in for like a 90-minute briefing. And we'd have the president's economic advisors, domestic policy, homeland security, national security. They would sit in a room and just let them kind of tell us about like what they saw as kind of big issues in the world, and they would become sort of a resource after that for our staff, because you can't staff that up internally very well.
No, I remember hearing something crazy that I don't remember if it's true or not. Is it true that the Pentagon has run like I don't know how many war games about China versus the U.S. and we don't win in any of them?
I don't know that.
Taiwan.
Yeah, I don't know that. I hope that's not true.
I didn't sound very good.
Yeah, there's got to be a scenario within which we win, but I don't know.
Yeah, I remember Mackenzie, one of the scholars, was talking about that we didn't win any when they did it with the Senate and Congress. So like war games were run between the two groups and they didn't win any. But I was hoping, I mean, you would think the Pentagon wouldn't let that out either. They're not, I imagine they're not gonna be like, the thing is, we're preemptively losing.
Yeah.
That's probably not a good idea.
Yeah, that's right. Or maybe that's what they want people to think.
Maintenance, 3D shows. Yeah. This is why I took the business. Okay. There was one other thing I wanted to talk about. You literally just got on a plane back from DC, and you were there all week. What's the vibe like there right now? Is everybody freaking out?
It wasn't as crazy as I thought it would be. Yeah, I mean, this trip was planned for a while, and so I kind of expected to be there and they'd still be counting votes. I didn't expect it, like everybody, didn't really expect this to be resolved the evening of. It just depends on who you talk to. There's a lot of panic among Democrats. There's kind of a strange amount of optimism among people on the political right. I think probably when I say surprising, I think it's more people that have been Trump skeptics, Trump wary, and even anti-Trump. I think there's a number of them now that's like, well, we've seen the show before with him, and there's also some real opportunity for maybe some disruption and reform in areas where we need that. And he's got his issues that he's really hyper-focused on, but that means there's opportunity within his administration elsewhere to get all kinds of other things done that are broadly aligned with what he cares about. So it's kind of an interesting, it was an interesting time. I mean, I think everyone's just kind of sitting there just nervously waiting to see what happens. And, you go from one day where like Marco Rubio's name is floated for Secretary of State, and everyone's like, well, that's a good decision or whatever. And then the next day he puts forward Matt Gaetz as Attorney General, and everyone's like, what in the world is going on here? So it's like, here we go again, sort of chaos and disruption. So there's kind of just nervous expectation, and some people are kind of nervously optimistic and others are nervously really, really worried right now. So like everything else over the last few months, all we can say is who really knows what it's going to look like there. come January. It's hard to say. And with John Thune becoming the Senate Majority Leader, that creates maybe a little bit of a break on the sort of MAGA elements in the Senate, because that was a hotly contested race too. Is Trump going to be able to get all of his people rubber stamped? Is he going to run into opposition within his own party? And I think given that vote, that's possible. So that'll create some dealing even within the GOP when it comes to appointments and decisions that are being made kind of early out of the gates.
Yeah. What about, well, first of all, I have been watching Twitter like it's prime time. I can't ever remember watching every cabinet position and say, like, who's it going to be? What's going to happen next? I think it's an American phenomenon that is reminiscent probably of like The Apprentice. It is incredible.
I think that's what they want you to do, right? Yeah. I actually got off Twitter before it became X. I burned out on it. Yeah, I got to the point where I realized I don't even like the people I like anymore. Yeah. My friends on Twitter who I've long loved and followed, I'm like, I don't even really like them anymore. So I'm just going to, I want to keep liking them. So I'm going to stop watching them on Twitter. And I hung it up. And to be honest with you, I've not missed it. I go there because people will make announcements there. Or a lot of times in my world, there's a really interesting study that gets released, and someone tweets it out. So I find myself going over there for content, but I can't do it anymore because I used to do that too. Election nights on Twitter used to be really fun, because just listening to everybody's hot takes. No,
Zero watching X.
No.
Wow.
No, just watch the returns and stayed off of people's, hot takes and, all that stuff. Yeah, decided to sit it out. I felt a lot happier and better.
That's very mature of you.
No, I don't know it's mature. It was just some self-awareness about what makes me a better and worse person.
Well, I want to talk about what you're doing today, because one of the reasons I want to have you in here is because we talk about it a lot, but, the university system, it seems to have a lot of problems today. And, from us watching student protesters pro-Hamas at NYU to watching what happens with, different racial divides at school, to wondering if students and teachers are really learning these days. From an outside perspective, the university system kind of appears broken, or at least under attack in some way. And you decided to start the Civitas Institute at University of Texas. Why? And what do you think you guys are going to be able to do different from inside one of the world's largest universities, University of Texas?
Yeah, the Civitas Institute is a great new creation. It's created to essentially be part of a much larger effort to kind of reclaim a place within this large Tier 1 great esteemed public research university, to kind of recover the basic principles of the American founding, of a free society, of the kind of commercial and economic life that supports and is the lifeblood of that society, to teach it in a historically accurate and proper way, and to do research that kind of advances these ideas and helps us understand what a free society should be looking like in the future, and what a growing and dynamic economy should look like in the future, and where we can make reforms possible. So Civitas, the best way to think of it is kind of a university-based think tank committed to those principles. So I've come from a think tank in Washington to build this organization into a similar type of thing at a university, which gives you access to all the research power of an institution like this, and really great faculty and experts from around the country to be a part of it. We are joined at the hip with this other a really important new effort called the School of Civic Leadership, and now technically housed within that school, since institutes and centers typically have to be housed within a degree-granting college. And this is a really exciting effort. The school is about a year old. It was created by the regents about a year and a half ago, and so it goes through a process of getting stood up, where a dean gets appointed. That's Justin Dyer, a great political scientist who's the inaugural dean of the school. And we've been hiring faculty into the school. And so we have gone through our first round of faculty hiring this year. Those people have shown up this fall. We're going through another round now. And by about the third year, we'll have about 20 full-time faculty teaching in the school. And the school is very much committed to constitutional studies, Western civilization, economics. It has elements of what people are familiar with the British PPE model of education. It's kind of, it's a philosophy, politics, and economics. It's like, I think every prime minister going back to who knows what did that at Oxford. It's a great way of getting a well-grounded education in these topics. That we don't call the degree that. We have a minor that's called that. The degree is called civics honors, and it combines these great elements of what we would think of as a really strong classical liberal arts education. And so we have the school that will have its inaugural freshman class next fall. And then we have the institute, which I run, which is standing up a whole bunch of different research programs and events on these issues of economic dynamism, political liberty, constitutional studies, and a bunch of policy papers on energy policy, education policy, a number of different types of things like that. So why is this important?
And why is it different?
Yeah.
Because a lot of schools have economic departments. They have history departments.
Yeah.
So at face level, people could be like, this exists already. What is any different about it?
So what's different about it in the School of Civic Leadership is the multidisciplinary aspect of it. So you can, the best way to think of, I think, the new School of Civic Leadership at UT is think of it as kind of an elite, small liberal arts college on this large public university campus. So this where students are studying these things together. Part of the problem in higher education today is just the fragmentation of studies. And so you can study American history without really ever studying the Constitution or without ever taking economics at a lot of universities. And this is a way for students, if they get enrolled in this school, they apply to come to UT and study in this school, this is their major, they're going to get this multidisciplinary degree. And I think that, I think we'll attract a lot of students that want to go to law school or that want to get their MBA. I think we'll get a lot of students that want to go on and do graduate studies in policy, or they want to teach. I think it'll attract that sort of a student, and we're out putting out the word to get people to apply. And I think we have a lot of students coming from areas where they're just interested in the history of American institutions, and they're interested in the way that the economy is and the way it should work, and they want to study all those things together. There has been, I just think there has been this drift in higher education over the last generation to monocultures, where there has been this move of sort of political leftist ideology, which has become entrenched within universities. And I say this as a historical and empirical matter. There have been a couple of books written about this, or people done lots of surveys, and it's just a matter of fact that the political leanings of faculty have really moved to the left since the 1960s in this country. And it's happened kind of decade by decade by decade, to the point where people do get screened out of certain colleges and schools and departments because of their political ideology. And I won't say where, but I've actually watched it happen. I've sat in a faculty meeting once before where a decision was made that we should actually look at where people's political leanings were in their writings or whatever when making decisions about hiring them or admitting students in. It's a real thing. And if you come from a perspective of more free market economics and political liberty, which kind of aligns you with the political right, or you've worked for a Republican like I have, you just sense it where on university campus, or people just say things to your face where they just assume they know what you think about issues. You're kind of you're easy to put in a box for them. And so I think it's important to course correct, and I think that's what's been happening, not just here with this effort, but in other places around the country where it's not about creating something that's partisan, and that's definitely not what we're doing. We don't screen any of our faculty or students based on political views. It's just we're building a kind of educational environment that's probably just attractive to people that probably lean a little bit right in their worldview. Whether they're registered as a Republican or not isn't the best indicator of that. It has to do with how they view the Constitution, how they view the question of political liberty, and especially the questions of human agency. I mean, if you believe that people have a responsibility to build and make the life that they want, and they should live in a society that allows them to do that, and they should be able to exercise their free choices there, you're going to probably be attracted to an effort like what we have. So this is happening here at UT. The University of Florida has the Hamilton Center. The University of North Carolina has just started a new School of Civic Thought and Leadership. Ohio State University has followed suit. This is starting to happen in a number of flagship state universities for very similar reasons, because there's just this growing awareness that we kind of need to recover a classical liberal arts education that helps prepare people for life in the institutions that run our country. So we can criticize those institutions, and that's what universities have become good at doing. We can try to undermine them, we can try to reinvent them or whatever. But the reality is we need people to be working in Congress. We need people in the media. We need people in businesses that have a civic function or have some role to play civically, to actually understand the institutions that they're going to be working in, their history, their origins, why they matter, how they function well and how they don't. And that's what I don't think our universities have been doing the best job of preparing people for. So this is a shot at doing it right.
Yeah, and you guys are attracting a ton of talent in the form of academics and professors who are kind of pissed. They're like, I'm tired of getting told what to think, where to think, how to think.
Yeah.
The point is to find the truth, not to have groupthink.
Yeah.
And so I've been really impressed at the roster that's coming over to you guys.
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, there is an awareness of some of these dysfunctions that I've been talking about among a lot of faculty around the country. And what we've learned, I was pretty bullish about this. When I left AEI to come down here, I was really bullish about our prospects to grow, to get good talent, to create something big and great, and to make an institution, at the Civitas Institute, to make it like an AEI or like a Hoover Institution at Stanford, something of that scale and scope. That's our ambition, and I think we're on the way to doing that. And so I was bullish from the start. But even with my bullishness, I've been surprised at how attractive this has been to people. We've had people reaching out to us in an unsolicited way. We've been doing a lot of recruiting. We've also had people just reaching out to us saying, you know what, I'm kind of tired of where I am. I'm tired of the groupthink. I'm tired of looking over my shoulder to see if people are going to try to cancel me or shout me down. I want to be at a place where I can pursue my work out in the open and in the true spirit of free inquiry. And that looks like what you guys are building. So it's almost serving to have like a magnetic effect. And as awful and as horrific as the events of October 7th last year were, what it kind of unleashed on university campuses in the aftermath has also just accelerated that sense of urgency. There are some people, I think, that were going home and complaining about the campus culture where they worked maybe to their partner or their spouse, where they started saying that stuff out loud too. So I think there's just been something in that environment from last fall going through the spring protests here, where we've had people say, what you're building looks like a true university environment. That's what I thought I was doing when I went to graduate school, and I don't want to be a part of something like that. So the environment has pushed people our way too. And then, if you've been reading these articles about, declining applications to Ivy League schools and people going to the SEC schools or applying there, that's true. I mean, we are seeing that at UT. And someone told me last week that our applications are up 98% year over year at UT. I mean, it's amazing how many people want to come and be a part of what we're doing. And not just to our school, but I mean to the university writ large. And I think I got that number right. But the anecdotes that you see, or the reporting that you might have seen in the New York Times or Wall Street Journal about people who you would think would be applying to the Ivies now applying to SEC, we're definitely seeing that as a true thing.
That's fascinating. 98% increase in applications at University of Texas. And we're seeing the Ivy League, so Harvard and Stanford and some of the historical best places you could go, where every parent wishes their child would go, actually determining that they want to go a different path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
has that ever happened before? Would this be the first?
I mean, I'm not aware of a historical precedent quite like this. And the thing is, for those of us who've been in higher ed for a while, a lot of the things that people have grown frustrated about over the last 5-7 years, critical race theory, seeing society as a set of structural inequalities or imbalances, and all that's kind of around that. I mean, this was not just invented in the last 5 years or so. I mean, when I was a graduate student in the late 1990s, we had critical race theory back then too. We had what we called the political correctness movement, but as a teaching fellow, as a graduate student, I had to go through trainings where we learned what words we couldn't say and all that stuff. I think what's happened is that enterprise, it's gone through several iterations, and this time it's just it's become more pervasive, and it's made its way into corporate HR offices, and it's made its way into K-12 education. It's become much more widespread in places where it hadn't been before, back in the days like when I was in graduate school. So there's just a lot more people aware of its effects, and they see the origins of it in the university world, in the world of higher education. And so they want, now people want to send their kids to places where that's least likely to happen. And I think on large, diverse public university campuses, it's less likely to happen there. And there's more checks and balances in a large public research institution. You are a university. You have trustees appointed by governors. You have state legislatures that provide oversight and funding. You have a student body from all across that state and beyond, and just many more departments. And so the way in which the monoculture sort of might capture an elite private college, or even I think some Ivy League universities very broadly, it's just less likely to happen here because you have these checks and balances. So people are figuring that out. And that's what they want. And just anecdotally, I run into this all the time. I mean, I was talking not long ago with a well-known economist who lives in Washington, D.C., sends her son to one of the elite schools in D.C. I'll leave it nameless, but people who know Washington, D.C. would definitely know it. It's one of those schools where every parent thinks their kids are going to be president someday or going to be senators or whatever, and they all go to the Ivies or they go to the elites. And she was telling me about how her son and his 7 friends are all applying to SEC schools, and that she and her husband are freaking out a little bit about it because they're spending all this money in this private prep school to send them to the elites, and now they found that their kids want to go where they can have like a real university experience, and they're pretty confident they'll get pretty good jobs on the back end of it anyway. So something's happening in a pretty big way right now, which is going to force some kind of accountability on, I think, some elite institutions that they haven't really felt the pressure to react to before. But I think it's actually going to change their behavior some.
One of my favorite CEOs used to say to me when I first came to the business that he'd eventually rub the MBA off me. And that always kind of made me chuckle. But now I understand a bit what he's talking about, because I think often, especially in some of these higher level institutions, I went to Georgetown, but you're sort of taught things in a way where you're like, this is the way to do it. This is the proper course to do X and Y and Z, which is hysterical once you're in business. Hearing somebody who's never been in business tell you the correct way to do something is really cute. And so I think I had that characteristic quite a bit. I want to talk a little bit about money and universities today. So student loan debt, all-time highs, almost $2 trillion. Over 100 of our taxpayer-funded in some way or another universities with endowments over $1 billion. Do you think the way we fund universities today is good for societies and kids, or do we need reform on that?
Yeah, we need reform. I mean, anytime you have a kind of a third-party payer system, whether it's in healthcare or education, you get all kinds of distortions, right? And so even the way that we've done student loans over the years has just made it easier for universities to run up the costs. I actually think that one of the really big problems is that growing pie slice. If you look at the university budget as a pie chart, that growing pie slice that has to do with just all kinds of programs that really don't have to do with classrooms, right? And hiring a lot of personnel to run all kinds of student-facing sorts of things that really aren't a part of the degree programs. And I think that's a problem. And I think that's had a really upward push on the cost of education at schools. And so that when people are borrowing and then paying off over a long period of time, that's not really the university's problem. And so if they can continue to increase tuition every year, that's what they've been doing. And now we're at this point where it's a real problem. I think in some ways, there are policy changes that one can propose and people have. In some ways, it's kind of like these dynamics, these marketplace dynamics will probably have more to do with cost control than anything right now. When people start to realize that the value of that $55,000, $60,000 a year private college degree is actually not worth very much. And if employers are hiring the graduate from that public university as opposed to the elite school because they're worried that they're going to get a culture warrior from the elite school, that's going to create some discipline as well. And I'm not just speculating there. I mean, this seems to be what's happening right now. We're seeing this is certainly happening anecdotally. It's been reported more than once that there's a number of large employers out there. Like I don't want some of the students from these places where the campus protests have been going on. Just don't want to hire them, and that bodes well for the graduates of large state schools. And so I think some of that will condition the way university administrators think about costs. I think smaller private schools that have gotten very expensive, their business models are just turning upside down right now, and so they have to keep from going out of business at some point. So I think those dynamics are real. But no, there's definitely things we should be doing more of. I mean, the income share agreement model that's been rolled out in a few different places, I think that has a lot of promise. I think it should be more widespread. Yeah, and so it's basically a different, instead of a student loan like you would typically get from one of the big lenders, you basically, some universities have done this through a fund where you're basically paying back a portion of your income to a group of investors or to basically a foundation that a university runs over time. And so instead of paying the set amount, you're paying a percentage of your income. So if you're a school teacher, you're paying one rate. If you're at Goldman Sachs, you're paying a different rate. And it's a way of kind of just making it easier on the graduate over time to pay back the cost of their education.
And theoretically, to incentivize the school to actually increase the ROI from college, because they want people who have higher incomes, because they could theoretically make more money off of them, right?
Right. It's a good point.
I don't know if there's second or third order effects I don't understand there. There probably are. Like then maybe people want deferred payment, maybe they want more equity, maybe you'd game that system too. But I think that's interesting.
Yeah. And I think there have been really good efforts by some university presidents that just kind of beg to be copied by others in terms of cost control.
In Indiana,
so Mitch Daniels at Purdue kept tuition at the same rate his entire decade he was there, never raised tuition once. And I'm from Indiana originally, and so I have friends who have kids at Purdue. That's like a household hero name there. And I know Mitch, and he's an absolutely amazing person and demonstrated that you can actually get costs under control. And if you add up everything that's done, you kind of get that net result. Nothing of it's sexy. You're just going around and you're selling off the fleet of university vehicles that they don't need anymore, and you're refiguring out the way that they do food in the dorms. Is one thing after another that he was able to do to make it possible to
while increasing the ranking. Right?
Yeah, right. While increasing the ranking.
So rankings increased, costs went down, and then flatlined for a decade.
And really one of the national leaders now in commercializing innovation. Purdue as an engineering hothouse was they have a research foundation where professors have been commercializing research on the scale of a Stanford or a Carnegie Mellon or
what
whatever.
What does that mean, commercializing research? Where it get profitable?
Yeah, where an engineer or someone who's on the faculty of a university invents something or comes up with a new molecule that can be turned into a particular drug that can be built by a company or a medical device or something like that, and they work with people in the private sector at companies or investors to kind of come up with a new product line. And that professor and the university's research foundation get some of those returns. And so Stanford's always been kind of the textbook case of this. And other universities, especially those with good engineering departments, have followed suit. But Purdue's done a great job there too. And they've done all of this while the cost of going there has remained steady.
And then how does that work? The engineer keeps a percentage of it, and the school does, and
it depends. Yeah, they all have different ways. Yeah, and I don't think very many universities do this super well. They could all improve in terms of the incentives that they create for faculty to commercialize. I did a deep dive on this about 10 years ago, and so my knowledge is a little bit dated. But you have a lot of various versions around the country of the same kind of bad practices, where some universities are very heavy-handed, and so there's not as much of an incentive for their scholars to work there. And so some people, including at Purdue, tried to kind of get ahead there. And I think at UT we do a good job of this as well. There's a great opportunity actually across the country for large research-based universities to kind of reconfigure the way that they do their commercialization agreements, their IP agreements with their scholars to get more intellectual property and all that's required to take an idea in a lab and turn it into a product that can be good for the world and also profitable for the people that are involved in it.
Like could universities become profit centers eventually, not based on could universities become profit centers eventually, not based on government taxpayer funding and endowments, but based on that theoretically and tuition?
I don't know. I mean, you would really have to ramp up the commercialization side because universities is big. Yeah, and these are big, huge operations that do cost a lot of money. And so when it comes to the finance of that and the model, I'm not really sure. But I think if you were going to commercialize at that, you'd almost have to have a university designed for that purpose that then also taught courses. I think it'd be pretty hard to take a large research university and make its revenue model based entirely on commercialization. But there are probably people here in Austin who might think of a way to do that.
Yeah, that's true. Well, the other thing that it just really ticks me off and blows my mind in two different ways is that, there's a little graph that I have here that we can put up for you guys to see on YouTube. But, the cost of university has gone up 4x, anywhere from 4x to 160%, I saw over a 40-year period. But the problem there is that the wages have really stagnated for people that have come out of it. So that's we have a growing gap between how much money you make from going to university versus the relative cost. But then we also are caught in a catch-22 because the median earnings for bachelor's degree holders is 35 to 40% higher than those who don't have it. So it's you got to go to college
to make more, but it's more expensive than it ever is relative to how much you make. And so how do we fix that? Or do you think that the point of college is not to make us make more money?
It's a great question. There's a couple questions in there. And I think to step back and look at the broader issue, and this goes back to your original question too, just the cost of a university degree right now is way more than it probably should be for the value in a lot of places. There's a study that just came out this past week that shows actually in large state universities over the last year, costs have not risen as much. In some cases, they've gone down in net terms. There's a certain methodology that they use to do that. So I think a place like the University of Texas, a place like Purdue that we're talking about, I think the value is still really there in the end for the family in terms of what comes out of their pockets or what comes out of their bank account and for the value that they get. I think the real problem are these really, really expensive, smaller private colleges. The elites, it still remains to be seen because they are still the elites. But I think the bigger story is that when you're in your early 20s, and I have two kids who are, you have the cost of school. And if you're carrying that debt, fortunately, my kids were fortunate enough not to have to be shouldering that debt, but a lot of their friends are. The cost of housing I think that's the big one. I mean, I really do think that the cost of housing is a huge one. Our healthcare system is also such that we pay a lot more personally than we would if we lived in some other countries. And that doesn't mean that you need a universalized system. You've got other competitive healthcare economies that just work better than ours does. And these things are all kind of barriers, not just to being able to afford a good home and have a middle class lifestyle. They're really barriers for people being able to become entrepreneurs early in their life. And this is your area of expertise, but to really be able to launch themselves much sooner. We really don't want to become like a European country where you have to live with your parents until you're in your 30s or whatever before you can afford to venture out. And we have been making decisions over time that have kind of put us on a path to that in some ways. And so a university education should prepare you for the world that you're entering in ways that I think a lot of universities just haven't. There's really, I think, a growing body and really interesting and compelling body of research that shows that really the most valuable thing about going to university is actually a lot of the stuff that happens maybe in a class, but it's not the point of that class. You are giving presentations, you're having to manage your schedule, you're having to write papers, and you're having to present, and you're having to work in teams. And what are sometimes called non-cognitive skills or social skills or the kinds of things that you actually perfect in that environment are the things that actually contribute to your earning power over time. So you might get a job out of college because of your degree. You might be an engineering student or something and get a job because of the kind of engineering degree you got. But 10 years from now, where you are is going to be based on all these other things. It's not going to be because of that degree. That degree is going to get you your first job, maybe your second, but probably not even that as much. It's these other things that you have learned how to do that really make you capable in the workplace. Conscientiousness, of the big 5 personality traits, conscientiousness is probably, it's one of the top 2 or 3 predictors of lifetime earnings. And that's the ability to think ahead, to be organized, to be a good listener, to be ambitious, and you combine all those things together and you get this trait called conscientiousness. And people who are high on that do really well. And that's what we should be thinking about when we're thinking about the best curriculum for students. So like in the School of Civic Leadership that we're standing up at the University of Texas, part of the goal of a multidisciplinary degree like this is to give students a really good grounding in American institutions, but to also create the instruction in a way where they're doing a lot of these sorts of things that I'm talking about. So they come out equipped for leadership within civic life in America, regardless of whether they're in business or they go to law school or what they do. That's where the real value is right now. And I think that's, again, the market's kind of sorting some of this out. When you feel like what you've got are a bunch of graduates from a school that have been indoctrinated in a certain worldview, and they're going to come and be like culture warriors in your company and create chaos, people don't want that. People want students that have had an experience, that have trained all these other sorts of things. So that's where the real value in a university education is, in addition to the actual topical major that you have. And I think the most innovative higher education administrators in the country are the ones who are figuring that out right now.
What about MBAs? Do you think those are worth it?
I don't know. You tell me.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I can only work from my personal experience, which is that it's a really nice credential to have. You know, people even to this day will say Codie Sanchez worked at Goldman Sachs in Georgetown, even though I wouldn't say those were at all my most formative moments.
Yeah.
Could I quantify the value of those two things as opposed to starting businesses very high? Probably not. But I don't know I don't know if there's research or thought surrounding it, but there is the pervasive belief on the internet. Like if we go broad-based internet, MBAs are a scam. You should never do them. They don't actually make you money. MBAs are really only good if you don't know what you're doing. And if you want to figure out where to go next, or you want to climb up a corporate ladder, get an MBA. But if you want to do a business, go do business. And I'm not sure what I think about that yet.
I mean, I think it's one of those questions that probably has kind of the both and kind of answer to it, because I think some of the critiques are going to have to do with the nature of just curricula itself, like what you're actually learning, and does that really prepare you for the marketplace? And the common critique I hear back is not really. Like a lot of times what you're learning in the classroom and then what you experience in the world are very different. But thought of as professional schools, where part of the experience of going there is the way that they are interrelated with the marketplace and with employers. They do serve as sort of funnels or training schools in many ways for really good jobs after that. And then that also conditions the way the faculty teach the courses, right? So, I mean, law schools are this way, good MBA programs are this way, where like during the course of it, you're not just taking classes, you're actually doing summer internships at organizations that you hope to get hired by in the future. And that integration of curriculum with the marketplace does seem to serve a valuable function, at least in some sectors and in certain areas. So, the large, I mean, we've got a very good business school at UT. It's got, the number one accounting program in the country. I mean, I think employers really value that. Yeah, she's great. Our current president, Jay Hartzell, was the dean of the school and did a phenomenal job. So I think it's had a good run of good leadership. And I think it's done well in the rankings as a reflection of how its graduates have actually landed and performed in the marketplace in the way that it's preparing people for that. So it's kind of I think there's so many different MBA programs around the country. It's hard to provide just one answer there. But I do think that integration with the employer marketplace is a really important thing. And some places really do that well. And when you come down from like the top 5 or top 10 or, the top 15 MBA schools to all the rest of them, I think all the more that really is going to be the determinant as to whether or not it's worth going there in the first place.
That's a great point. Yeah, one of the things I liked is when you and Jay and Justin, so all the heads of UT and then Civitas and the School of Civic Leadership were together at that last little get-together. That was one of the first things you were talking about, is that we're actively right now, before the program's even been created, looking for companies that want to work with these kids. And to me, like, it's great to hear theory from academics, but that practical application, or what you call integration, is probably the real key.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times people use this euphemism of the most important part about going to school is your network. And they think that means the other students or the faculty. But I don't actually think that's right. It's, do I get to meet, senior leaders at Deloitte, and thus I get to go work at Deloitte later because they had a program for easier access to entry to these large corporations, which are sometimes these large corporations are like paid MBAs. Because they put $100,000. I mean, I bet Deloitte puts $100,000 into new hires in their specialty programs per year because they have massive training to do consulting, let's say. So I think that's really cool that you guys are doing that.
Yeah, and that's with the new School of Civic Leadership at UT, the students will have internships all the way through, and that's an important part of it. And
is that like a grade? So they have to? Is it like? Oh,
yeah, it'll be a part of it.
It was mandated for me.
Yeah, it'll be a part of the experience, and so they'll get this really well-rounded education, and they'll have internships throughout the time. And for a lot of the reasons we were talking about earlier in our conversation, I think there's a lot of employers that will just be primed to hire them. For those that don't go to graduate school, I actually think they will. Yeah, that's right. Well, yeah, that's right. Yeah. Because I think, a lot of people are like, we want these sorts of graduates. So, I don't necessarily need someone with just the narrow degree topic. I need someone that can actually function in a complex and interesting environment. And that's what I think our graduates will be.
Yeah, and I think a lot of corporations want ethics and morals in a different way. Like Tanner and I just brought on a new hire. His name is Levi. He's amazing so far. Don't listen to this, Levi, because you got to keep it up. But he brings a Bible in and sets it on his desk every day. And, he asked if he could come in early because he has a larger drive. So he's like, I'd like to be here at like 6:30 in the morning because I have a little bit longer of a drive. And, finding people that are like ethically or morally aligned with not my beliefs. Like they don't have to believe the same thing that I do, but they have to want to try to be, a good person that believes in free thinking and contrasting opinions. And if they are, they'll work well here. And if not, they won't. So I don't want to get them anyway.
Absolutely. It's hard to quantify and it's hard to study, but to the extent that we can study the way that trust develops when we're studying social capital, like, closely knit, well-functioning organizations or communities, and how trust is developed and earned. I mean, in high trust areas, you have higher productivity rates. You have in geographic regions where you have more social capital measured even just by civic and voluntary participation, you have higher levels of regional GDP. When people live and work in high trust environments, they can get more done in a shorter period of time because there's less sand in the gears, there's less friction, there's less problems to sort through. And if you've run an organization, or I've been fortunate or cursed, however you look at it, to start organizations or start organizations within organizations and grow and build things, you just know this. I mean, you just know that having people of integrity, people that are honest, people that are hardworking, that are motivated by kind of a good moral framework and work well with others, you can just get so much more done, and you can actually all be going down the same track together, instead of having to deal with all of the friction and dysfunction that comes sometimes from the one squeaky wheel too. So anyone who's run something, you probably made this mistake, I know, or maybe no one else has, but I have, where you're like, that person has some characteristics that made me nervous, but they're really, really good at this one thing that I need done. And you're like, we'll figure out how to deal with that other stuff. And it's like, yeah, you know what? You will deal with that other stuff. And it'll take up a lot of your time, and it'll upset other colleagues, and you'll end up loading other people up with work because you don't trust this person anymore. And it's a real headache. And so I think this groundedness in a core set of principles that enable you to be that conscientious person that I was talking about earlier is really what anyone running a company or an organization wants. And so we should take that seriously when we're educating our children, and then when we're designing higher education environments for them at university or community college or whatever the post-secondary world is that they're in. It's absolutely essential. When I've gone around the country and looked at effective vocational training, so for people that don't go to a 4-year university, we have these really good programs, is usually not by a policy design. It's almost in spite of federal and state workforce policy, which I think is an area that's ripe for reform that no one has ever quite figured out. You'll see that a lot of times it's employer partnerships with a community college or a vocational school of some kind, where part of the curriculum is this stuff, saying earlier, students benefit in a 4-year degree program because they're just forced to do presentations and work together and plan and all those kinds of things. When you're like a commuter at a community college, that's less a part of your experience. But the effective programs are often those where you have partnerships with employers, where that kind of leadership training, planning, problem solving, presenting, working in teams, those kinds of things are built into the experience so that they can actually have graduates of those programs that have those same sets of skills. So there are different ways to kind of inculcate, encourage integrity, honesty, the right kind of ambition in people. And I think they should be really central to anyone designing curriculum. It shouldn't be an afterthought. It should be central to what you're doing.
That's a good point. So say you're a parent and you're trying to figure out where to send your kid to college, or you're a student, or you're a young person yourself, and you're trying to figure out what actually matters. What do you do? How do you screen these institutions?
Well, I think you should send them to the School of Civic Leadership at the University of Texas. But yeah, definitely send them there. Send them our way. I think the issues related to all the culture wars on college campuses, a lot of that can now be seen. I mean, some of these schools have been out there, back when they were all on the right side of history, planting their flag on this or that cause over the last 5 years or so. They're now paying a price for that. And you don't unwind that stuff overnight. So I would be very wary about sending my kid right now to an Ivy League school that's been all in there. And just talking with faculty at those places and people that have recently come from them, it just kind of reinforces. It's like, I would just be worried. And I have plenty of friends. I'm in that age where I've got people, my peers have kids in college, and it's amazing over the last few years, the number of complaints that I hear from people who sent their kids to what should have been not that long ago a really great, outstanding elite institution, mostly in the Northeast. So I think you want to look at how much these colleges actually spend on the non-classroom facing side of the ledger. I think that's a big one, like I was saying earlier. You want to look at the constitution of the faculty in the departments where they're going to go. Do they really have ideological diversity there, or do they have people across different disciplines? And can your child get an education where it's well-rounded, where they're not just in a certain narrow track, or they can just kind of choose electives to kind of just patch together something that's kind of meaningless over time. There's not just one thing to look at. There's a bunch.
God, that's so much harder than back in the day. We used to take like the USA Today rankings or whatever, see which one was best, and like try to figure out how they're in there.
Yeah.
I think that was basically as crazy as it went.
Yeah. No, I think you want to be a little bit more careful now, and look at look at whether the university has embraced a statement of principles about. There's a Chicago statement of principles of academic freedom. A number of universities have done that as well, and I think you should take a look at that. It doesn't mean that even if they sign the statement that every department in every way is doing that, but at least there's a commitment there. And I think those are pretty important indicators right now.
So if your kid right now got into like Princeton, Harvard, an Ivy League school, would you say, hey, let's think about this?
Probably. Yeah. I mean, it's just probably because I have friends who have had their kids there where they've had a bad experience. Not everyone. I mean, others have had a great experience. A lot of it does depend on the department, the specific school or college that you're in, but I would be wary of it right now. Both of my now adult kids graduated from the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. We used to live in the UK. They wanted to go back to the UK for college. And, that's this great elite institution. Is over 600 years old. It stands on its this amazing set of traditions, but they haven't, and this is typical of a lot of universities in the UK, they haven't grown that slice of the pie that I was talking about. I mean, they really focus on instruction. They focus, it's students, it's professors, and you have a bunch of student associations, but the academic format, the seminar-based learning, it's the same as it's been for a long time. Students know why they're there to learn, and they had an amazing experience, does the student body have, as a collective, do you have all the views there of all kinds of issues that you would find on any university campus? Of course. But they haven't been weaponized in the same way that they have in a lot of American universities. And we have to ask, why has it been so easy, it seems like recently, to actually weaponize ideologies on university campuses when it's actually not happening in the same way in other countries? And we realize we have kind of I think it's a very distinctive American problem. And when you have the president of France telling us not to import all these crazy ideas, the country that gave us Jacques Derrida and Michel Foucault, and
God help us,
that gave us that saying, please stop sending all your crazy ideas back our way. I thought that was actually kind of telling and actually a little funny.
Yeah, that gets my favorite. I love a good conspiracy theory. So that's so many to count there. I remember I was sitting at an event. I don't remember if you were at this one or not, but it was with one of the Ivy League presidents versus another well-established university that was not Ivy League, and the very counter opinions. And I remember being shocked because the president was basically saying, of the Ivy League school, was saying, we don't have any ideological divide here. Actually, we're very measured. And there's no one side that has everything. And in fact, we don't even have that much of a higher percentage on one side than the other. And no, we really didn't vote for one candidate versus another. And I remember the audience all kind of looking out. And then we have these beautiful Library of Alexandrias at our fingertips, aka Google.
Yeah.
And so, everybody's, and they're asking questions like, well, how about this 80% number here? And how about this? But what was fascinating to me was the depth of either the denial or the non-agreement or the belief that it wasn't an issue or the gaslighting or whatever. From somebody who is very intelligent.
Yeah. Now, this is very common. And I, just because of the nature of my professional work and trajectory, I spent a lot of time around kind of two communities that have this attribute that you're talking about. One is just higher education. The other is the media, where you'll talk with very smart, well-meaning people, and they're not trying to dissemble on purpose. They really do think that they're in an institution where there's a healthy amount of ideological diversity. because from their perspective, there is. But for the rest of America and for the rest of us who don't fit within the continuum of diversity they're talking about, there's all these people over here that just are not represented on your faculty or in your institution. And you see this in newsrooms as well, just within the media. And if you spend a lot of time in Washington, D.C., as I've had to do in my career, and you go to a lot of dinners with people like this, there's just a lot of shared assumptions that you're in the fishbowl, you're swimming around, you can't see the water that you're in. And we all think that we're not going to become like that. But it's actually very easy to become like that when you live and work with people that all share some basic assumptions. It also helps explain like why, even this last election, in the predictions that we saw, and then the shock at the outcome was because the people who are basically covering and also reporting and creating the news have so many shared assumptions that they just can't get themselves out of it to actually make other kinds of predictions or speculations. And there's probably some reasons for that are related to even what we've been talking about. I think I have journalist friends who've looked into this more than I have, so I'm just reporting on what they've told me. But just over the last generation, the way that so many journalists, especially for the top papers, come from a lot of the same colleges and universities, it's that same sort of thing and the same socioeconomic status. And you don't have, and like in the old days where you'd have, just kind of street beat like reporters walking around without an ideological agenda, just doing the investigative thing, covering the news, reporting on it, from middle class backgrounds, from working class backgrounds, from all over the country, that you've seen even within the media class a kind of it's like they've coalesced around a certain shared set of assumptions that are very consistent with what they would have gotten from universities that they went to. So I hear this a lot in when I'm on university campuses. I'll hear people say, like, why are you guys doing what you're doing? Like, we've got plenty of diversity in higher ed. I mean, there's a lot of people that think differently from each other. And I just think that's just clearly not true. I mean, and any survey that we've seen of university faculty shows that's not true. And there have been similar surveys done of journalists as well. And we realize that they have political leanings that are much more similar than they are different. And that becomes a problem. It does, you understand why in the American heartland there's such a distrust of expertise. And I say this as someone who lives within the world of expertise. And as I started out saying earlier, when we were talking about time with the wise, you need experts. And I am a strong believer in the value of what we might call elite institutions in America. We need our universities and we need governmental organizations to help implement policy and all these kinds of things. But when there's arrogance, condescension, and a resistance to true free inquiry, then you've got a problem. And that's where just the ordinary, everyday Americans can sniff that out. I have them in my extended family and my friends back home, and it's, you don't have to look very far to find people who aren't a part of elite society who have a pretty good read on what's wrong with it.
Yeah. I think that's the most fun part about having a podcast and doing what we do with YouTube and going out. And, the other day I was with a guy who runs a porta potty company. And so I'm like helping him clean out porta potties in Houston, Texas, and then we're with Spencer, who runs garbage trucks just one day a week. And he's a software guy during the week. And so like you get all these different perspectives that quite honestly, in America, we have a lot of divergence of socioeconomics that we don't touch that much. And so when I go and stand in the lobby of AEI and I'm sort of in awe of like the beauty of this institution, well, guess who's not coming in there often? Spencer, who drives the truck outside of Dallas, Texas. And so, I think part of this and what's happening in the U.S. is interesting because I think it's showing a light on average Americans, which they want to have a couple weeks vacation. They want to be with their kids. They don't want you to tell them what to do about their kids. And this kind of transcends race, actually. Yep. And I'm Latino, and I just always have a chuckle when a white person who's never been to the border tells me about what's going on at the border, when I used to be a journalist there and I've crossed the border innumerable times. Mm-hmm. And so I always kind of chuckle a little bit about how we are so set in our ways when we haven't seen them from another's perspective.
Yeah, for sure. And that is, I think, we're seeing play out kind of on the national stage right now. There was a really great, large national survey this last week, and I'm forgetting the organization that did it.
We can find it.
Which is, I can send you the link.
Okay.
We'll
put it on the show notes.
Yeah, put it in the show notes because it's a really, really great survey. The sample is like over 3,000, 3,500 people or so, and it's a meaningful sample where they looked at, after the election, who people voted for, what category were they swing voters in swing states, and what issues motivated them. And for all swing voters, inflation was a huge thing, and just the sense that the Biden administration and then Kamala Harris as a candidate, wasn't paying attention to that. But when you look at the people who identified themselves as swing voters who eventually broke for Trump, the issue, the culture wars issue, outranked the inflation issue for them. And we know now that like the Trump campaign spent like $250 million on that one ad about transgender in prisons, when Kamala Harris was talking about supporting transgender surgery in prisons and all that. They found that moved undecided voters in their testing more than anything. So they just ran that thing like crazy.
Well, how about his one-liner too? It was like, you can love him or hate him, and most people are only on one end or the other of the spectrum. But his line about she's for they, them, I'm for you. I was like, the guy is made for TV.
Yeah, no, and that turns out that for people in those swing states that were really important, those battleground states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, the ones we all were hearing about and watching for months. I found it hard to believe there were still undecided voters in this country, a month ago or so, but I guess there were. And these issues really mattered for people. So I think the reckoning on, the COVID era, school closures, public health experts dissembling before Americans and getting caught doing so. I think these gender issues that have, again, it's the amount of time they've taken up. It's not so much that people have these strong views about the issues themselves. It's that it's being told that this has to be the most important thing when inflation is high. And I think and then the free speech on campus stuff has actually played a lot. So these now have emerged in surveys. These have emerged as issues we now know that really motivated a lot of voters. And back when we were building the Survey Center on American Life at AEI, which my now former colleague Dan Cox is doing a great job of running, he's a great pollster. We did all these big, large national surveys trying to drill down a few layers beyond just political attitudes to see what really motivated people. And we found, like other large surveys, like More in Common has done and a few other organizations, that from the heated summer of 2020, the George Floyd pandemic summer, when we had all this unrest in our cities and all the aftermath of that, when culture wars were really kind of taking off, 2/3 of Americans, whether they were Democrats or Republicans, when you were asking them to rank order the things that were most important in their lives, it was jobs for their kids, it was public safety in their neighborhoods, it was really bread and butter issues. And culture war issues that seemed to be on the national stage in bright lights were really not showing up at all, except the public safety one, because of the unrest in cities. We saw even people in suburbs of cities that were experiencing a lot of violence were saying they felt really unsafe, even though crime hadn't gone up on their streets, because it was just around, it was in the news so much. And so I think, just so many people in the elite class, and especially on the elite left, just did not learn these lessons. And this they should have seen this coming, because, a lot of people, including myself, were writing about this. We're like, look, I mean, even in the wake of the George Floyd murder, you have a lot of inner city residents saying that public safety is the most important thing. The last thing they want is to defund the police. It's been kind of one thing after another, where there's been this kind of arrogant disconnection from what ordinary people, even their own constituents in their own cities and neighborhoods, were telling them that they refuse to believe were all that important. And now they've paid a political price for it. And now Donald Trump's going to be president again because of this. And I think, a lot of the narrative has been on him capturing the popular vote. And that is incredible, given how Republicans haven't done that in a long time. But he still got a lot fewer votes than Joe Biden. She got way less than that. And so there's another, his victory is an amazing kind of political comeback story, one of the most ever. But her slide from 2020, like her performance with key demographics, doing so much worse than Joe Biden, I think is explained mostly by these issues. And I think as we study this more, I think the inflation will clearly, just feeling like we have an administration that's not doing enough about the cost of living was a big thing. We know that's true. But these other issues of elevated importance, when most Americans wanted them ranked more like 9, 10, 11 on a survey, and you have this kind of progressive elite trying to get you to rank them 1, 2, 3, people were just exhausted by that and were for a long time. And now we can see that more clearly.
Yeah. This is a little bit off topic, but the these, like, I was looking at a survey the other day. The survey said, I'm going to mess up the exact number. I'll link it below. The survey says at the highlight of the article is women-owned businesses have a 35% higher ROI than male-owned businesses. And I was like, that's fascinating, really. That would be stark difference.
Yeah.
How? So then I clicked on it. And as I clicked on it, what the actual survey was in one private equity fund, their portfolio at that time had 35% higher ROI from the female-owned companies than the male, which, was maybe a couple hundred companies, highly specified in the CPG space, which is dominated by women predominantly, lots of beauty products. So not exactly the same headline. You have specialized in studies and polls and how to conduct them for a long time. Do you have like a couple tips for those of us who we see these headlines everywhere? We're seeing polls everywhere. They're fucking wrong all the time. They're like lying to us with numbers. How do we quickly ascertain like, hey, that's not a reasonable piece of data to use, or that's not a good study to be conducted? Are there a few like red flags we can look for?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a good question because people are citing surveys all the time to make the point that they want to make. And you've seen this in the political polling. You probably heard people talk about it, just the margin of error, thing. There's a whole debate about margins of error and all that too. But if a sample size is small and a margin of error is like 5 to 6%, then 52 to 48 doesn't really mean anything in that regard, right? And so that's not a 4-point advantage. It could be the other way. So that's the main one. I tend to look for the size of the sample. Is it a lot of people that they're surveying? And is it a credible survey company that has successfully built sort of panel studies over time where they've predicted things pretty well? And so I think when you have these really small samples, large margins of error, and it's not clear that this sample is representative of the population as a whole or the population we're trying to learn something about, some subsector, then you should be wary of it. And if it's a complete outlier from other surveys, that might tell you something too. It's like, well, maybe they have found something that no one else found, or maybe that's just completely wrong. So that's another one. When we started building the survey center at AEI, one of the things we wanted to do and did early on was a big national survey on a whole bunch of issues, but included within the questions we asked were the 20 questions from the UCLA Loneliness Index, because we learned everyone was talking about the crisis of loneliness in America. But when we were trying to figure out what surveys they were like exactly how they were measuring that, we realized that we kept clicking back to this one, I won't name the organization, that did like a survey with about 800 people. Most of it was skewed old in terms of the average age of the participants. And everyone was drawing all these conclusions from this very small, kind of crappy survey. And so we could only find one other large national survey that had been done in like the last decade that could be considered representative and kind of credible. And I felt like the results were mixed. So we did a large national survey, and our results were fairly similar to that other large national survey. And so we found that the question of loneliness is very nuanced. It's, you have to be careful when you're saying that like all young people are suffering a crisis of loneliness, because it's actually not true. There are certain types of young people that are very lonely. And it's like you want to tailor your response to that population and not start drawing conclusions from everything. Well, that means all social media is bad. And, there's that whole like if you're on Instagram, and that means you're probably miserable. And so it's like, well, some people are, but there's a lot of people who are on social media a lot who aren't miserable. And so that tells you something. It's like, well, let's try to understand what it is about the people who are miserable so that we can fashion either a policy response or a public health response or something that's accurate. And we were motivated to do that work precisely because of the problem that you said, that it was just accepted by everyone. We have a pandemic of loneliness in America. And then we're like, show me the evidence for that. It's like, well, it's this one survey that's really bad that everyone kept citing.
What's fascinating is that's kind of how it goes. It's like turtles all the way down. There was another survey I was trying to find original data for, and it was something about entrepreneurship. Like, oh, you know what it was? It was a statistic that I've used before that now I'm worried about, which is that the average entrepreneur of a company makes like $47,000 a year on average. And I thought, God, that's not that high for the risk that one takes to become an entrepreneur. If that is true, then your risk-reward basis is actually super off, and we should rethink this whole thing. And I cannot find for the life of me that study linked anywhere except to a very small study done by like a one-off company I've never heard of that did it in 1 year that was like 2019. And so now we're trying to figure out like what actually is the average pay. And I think I came to you too with a lot of this stuff around small business. And you were like, the thing is, small business statistics are really hard to find. And even the SBA doesn't survey that well. And so, you're not going to know about this because you're healthy and not on Twitter. But I did have this little giggle about, you know who Nate Silver is, right?
Yeah, sure.
So he kind of famously did this tweet that said, I ran 80,444 surveys, polls for Kamala Harris versus Trump, and in every single one, except X percent, that was really, really tiny, Kamala wins. And so after the election comes out, it was, the memes were incredible. They were like, you should have ran 81,445. And like, so it's just one after the other. But I think it goes to this point of like, who are you surveying? Are you surveying the same group of people 80,000 times with the same methodology? Because then you're probably not going to get anything else.
Yeah.
And you're
right.
in your own bubble. Okay. One thing I want to talk about to sort of wrap us out here is Trump has made a lot of comments this week on education. And one of the more intense ones was that he wants to end the Department of Education and send all the education back to the states. Let's show this clip really quick.
One other thing I'll be doing very early in the administration is closing up the Department of Education in Washington, D.C., and sending all education and education work and needs back to the states. We want them to run the education of our children.
What do you think about that? Can that really happen?
This has been proposed before. It's when the Tea Party election of 2010, when Republicans overwhelmingly took the House of Representatives, and this was during the first Obama term. It was kind of a reaction to Obamacare and, all the kind of political devices, grassroots movement. That was actually one of the things that they were calling for back then too.